Hello, everybody. I am Eric Slodgy. I'm the host and producer of the Uncomfortable Podcast. It started out as a paranormal podcast, everything under the sun, and about a year and a half into it, 70-some shows, and over 50% of them have been Bigfoot related. The vast majority of those episodes are from Michigan. Now, I live in South Bend, Indiana, which is right at the state line. So 90 times out of 100, when I turn out of my neighborhood, I go into Michigan. So I'm kind of like a Michigan transplant. When I had my kids, we lived there. And so it's just, Bigfoot has been a huge part of my paranormal journey since I was a kid. I think 7 years old, I got this book in our library at grade school, and the first half of the book was about Bigfoot. The second half was about Loch Ness Monster. Everybody in this room probably has seen that book. So early on, I was really fortunate to have an incredible story come my way. And if I would encourage any of you who are interested in podcasts to go to Uncomfortable Podcasts and listen to episodes 2 and 3. It's called Opening Day. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it's really an amazing tale. But what I wanted to share with you to kind of get the ball rolling, I think it was my 5th episode. I decided to do an episode with a Native American witch. It wound up being the 3 strangest hours of my life. It was filled with all kinds of historical anecdotes. She could trace both sides of her family way, way back. And we talked about her magic, practicing witchcraft. And then she started talking about Bigfoot, specifically on her property. And this is in southwest Michigan. She took me into a room where we decided to do the interview. Rarely do I do interviews in person. It's usually over a phone because there's always quite a distance. She lived relatively close to me, so I went to her house. She took me into this room. We closed the door, and the one wall was all windows, and it faced out to a field. You ever drive by a farm, and it's all plowed fields, but then you see an acre of trees, and I've always wondered, why do they do that? Well, during the middle of the conversation, she was in the middle of a sentence, literally finishing the word and something came through the wall and the window and permeated that room that was so loud, so bombastic, that, and it's happening now as I'm talking about it, every inch of my body went to chill bumps. My hair stood on end, hair on the back of my neck stood up. And the first thought that went through my head was, shit, I left my gun out in the car. Immediately followed by, shit, I got 40 pounds of dog food in my back seat. 2 very strange thoughts to go through my head from hearing a sound. Now, as I said, I have a podcast, and I have invested a good deal of money in that podcast equipment. I was sure that my equipment picked up that sound. When it happened, both her and I reacted. We both turned towards the windows that it came from. And I can't tell you how loud it was. It was incredible. And both of our bodies reacted to it. On the way home, I'll take this one step further. As I was leaving her house, she walked me out to the car. I was loading my equipment, and she stood at the front of my car, and she looked back at the woods behind her property. And she put her hands up like this and went, whoop. And I'll be damned. From way off on the other side of the stream, you hear whoop. And then way over there, whoop. And she turned around and she looked at me and she said, isn't that cute? Isn't that neat? And I was like, I don't know. Is it? Is it neat? Because it scared the hell out of me. Yeah. So I got in my car. I had about a 35-minute drive home. I immediately called my son. And I said, buddy, you got to talk me off the ledge here because I don't know what the hell just happened. And he's like, what? What's going on? And I said, well, I'm doing the interview, just like I told you. I get to the part where this sound hits us. And he starts asking me a bunch of questions. He's like, well, what did it sound like? Was it a whoop? Was it a call? Was it a scream? What was it? What was it? And finally I had a man like, shut up. Quit asking me. I don't know. I can't explain it to you. All I can tell you is how my body reacted. So he talked me down. We talked the rest of the way home. I got home and I immediately took my SD card out of my equipment, put it into my computer. I'm like, I got to get this on here. I got to hear this. And there's nothing. There is her interrupting a sentence after saying the word and. And when she hits the letter D at the end of and, you hear this tiny little ooh. And I was like, and you can hear our reactions on the recording. I say, what the hell was that? And she goes, did you hear that? And I'm like, yes, I heard it. I'm like, look at my arms. So, we're talking through the whole experience of it. It's not on the tape. So I isolate that, about 10 seconds of it. And I start monkeying with it, trying to get higher levels on it, trying to reduce background noise. And I played it for a friend of mine. And they're like, yeah, I hear it. I couldn't hear it. And then I played it for somebody else, and they're sitting probably as far away from me as Shelley is. They're listening to it on their phone, my phone in their hands, and I can hear it clear as a bell. It is the weirdest damn thing. It has such an odd acoustic quality to it that 9 out of 10 times when you listen to it, you might get a little woo. You might not hear anything. And then from 20 feet away, you can hear it clear as a bell. And it took me about 3 or 4 days of trying to figure out what the hell happened. And then it hit me. You talk about infrasound, the possibility that these things use infrasound. And then the description came to my mind. It hit me like a wave. It was like this, and then it kind of released a little bit. And then it came back, but it wasn't as strong as it was. Not the sound. It was like an electrical, weird electrical feeling, because I don't know if you can see my arm, but I got chills again. And it just kept coming back. And each time it came back, it was a little bit less. And then a little bit less. And then a little bit less. And at the end of it, I don't know how many times it happened, 3 or 4 times, and it was gone. And I didn't have any more. So it finally dawned on me. I know what people mean when they say they got zapped. Because it was, in the best of my recollection, it was an electrical manifestation. Whatever it did to my body felt electrical. So that's about it for me.
Ken Gerhard is a widely recognized cryptozoologist, an author, and a lecturer. Ken has traveled the world searching for evidence of mysterious creatures, including Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, the Mothman, and the Beast of Gévaudan. In addition, he has written 6 books on the subject of unknown animals. His research has been featured on numerous TV shows, including Missing in Alaska, Monster Quest, Ancient Aliens, America on Earth, The Unexplained, and Legend Hunters. Ken, thanks for sitting down with us.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So, we don't really know much about Bigfoot. So we came to this conference essentially to find out a little bit more about it, then learn from people that know more than we do. Mm-hmm. So I just want to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
Ken, when did you start? When was your first belief in Bigfoot? When did that kind of pique your interest, and when did you first start to believe in Bigfoot?
Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify that belief is not a thing with me personally, because I try to approach this from a scientific perspective. And in science, belief implies that you basically want something to be real. It's more of an emotional attachment. So what I tell people is that I'm 90% convinced that Bigfoot exists based on 45 years of research all over the continent, working with all the leading investigators, interviewing hundreds of eyewitnesses, and I've never seen one with my own eyes, which is why I tell people I'm 90% convinced, because that's a scientific way to look at it. There's always a margin of error, But I'm fairly convinced that they do exist. But I was about 9 years old. I grew up loving monsters, monster movies. I had a lot of exotic pets as a kid, snakes and alligators and things. And so when I found out about Bigfoot, when I was about 9 years old, I saw a TV show and it was just like something clicked inside me. And I thought, well, it's a monster and maybe it's an unknown animal, kind of combines everything that I love. So I've been on the trail for 45 years now.
That's awesome. And kind of playing off that, I mean, what do you think Bigfoot is? There's a little bit of speculation. Some say, it's a mammal or a monkey type creature. Some say it's kind of human. What is your, I guess, how do you approach it, and what do you think that it possibly is?
Yeah, so within the Bigfoot community, I'm what is known as an aper,
okay,
which basically means that if Bigfoot exists, I think it's a hominin, which is a great ape.
Okay.
And that it has a similar locomotor system to us. That is, it walks upright, primarily on its hind legs, which makes it look very human. But as far as the physical characteristics that are described, covered in hair, ape-like features, receding forehead, sagittal crest, powerfully built, it's an ape. And that's my opinion.
Okay. And I mean, what would you say to some people that maybe necessarily are haters or naysayers about the topic? I mean, what do you kind of have to say to them?
Well, first of all, based on recent surveys, about 82% of the population does not think there's any chance that Bigfoot could exist. Right. So only 18% of people think that it's even possible that this thing does exist. So we are in a minority. So I understand why people think that it probably doesn't exist, even though everybody loves the idea of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cultural icon. We love it in commercials, movies, those little cutout things that people put in their yard now. So what I can tell people is that if you really delve into the material and immerse yourself in the evidence, it's actually pretty compelling when you combine thousands of eyewitness accounts that are very consistent, Native American legends all over the continent that talk about a big, hairy, wild man, the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is really the only really convincing film footage we have, the footprint evidence. There have been hundreds of casts made of footprint impressions that are very consistent,
right,
and things that look like Bigfoot actually did exist in the fossil record. They were called hominins, and for 2 million years in Africa, they were basically upright walking apes. They weren't as tall as Bigfoot. That's the only thing that doesn't really match up with the modern sightings of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So if you consider all of that, it's actually, in my opinion at least, that's a pretty compelling body of evidence that they do exist.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard a lot today is a couple of the speakers believe that it's primary to North America. Now, you do not believe that. Is that correct? I believe you're speaking how there's multiple cultures have different names for Bigfoot. they've seen it in China. They've seen well, you just said they've seen it in Africa.
Yeah.
So do you think it's kind of
it's
all over the world?
You can go worldwide and say that things like Bigfoot exist in Asia. We know them as the Yeti,
Yep.
the Yeren, the Almas, the Mande Barung, the Barmanu, the Goirung. In Australia, they're known as the Yowie or Yahoo. South America has the Ucumar and Mapinguari. I've investigated Bigfoot in Central America called the Sisamito. A lot of people don't know this, but there are sightings in Mexico and Central America. So Bigfoot doesn't stop at the border.
Yeah.
Sightings go all the way. So that's another level of, where do we get all of these worldwide legends from different cultures that are separated and disparate, and they go back hundreds of years, and even thousands of years. If you go to ancient Babylon, there was a poem called the Epic of Gilgamesh, where they talk about a big hairy wild man called Enkidu that runs with the animals. So, to me, it's intriguing, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, there's also kind of a debate about the intelligence of Bigfoot. Obviously, it's a highly intelligent creature, but some would believe that it has supernatural or even paranormal skills. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, looking at it scientifically and really zoologically, because as a cryptozoologist, I look through the lens of zoology at all of these mysteries. I'm a very open-minded person. I have friends that are involved in paranormal, supernatural research. I have friends that are UFO investigators. I find all of it fascinating and possible.
Yeah.
But with regard to Bigfoot, my own personal experience has been, through 45 years of research, interviewing hundreds of eyewitnesses, is that only about 3% of the evidence would indicate any kind of supernatural origin, or I've never experienced any high strangeness like that. So in my own opinion, that is really the result of a sort of a sociological or cultural phenomenon with regard to Bigfoot. And not to be too verbose, but there's a human thing called apophenia. It's a psychological condition that we all unconsciously demonstrate. And what apophenia is it's an unconscious need for us as humans to find meaningful connections between things that are sometimes unrelated.
Yeah.
And with regard to the supernatural and Bigfoot, they're both iconic mysteries all over the world for centuries. And the way that our brains have evolved, some people find just this need to find that connection between Bigfoot and UFOs, or Bigfoot and the supernatural. And, many people are also very spiritual in nature. And there's a sense of a confirmation bias with regard to Bigfoot, because most of the people that I meet that think Bigfoot is supernatural are people that are already all in on the paranormal.
Right.
So they come from that background, that's what they're comfortable with, and they want to sort of connect that to their own sort of experience.
Right. And then my last, it's not really much of a question, but kind of just, before we end, just explain kind of briefly what a cryptozoologist is. I don't feel like a lot of people are very familiar with that term. I know I myself am not. So just kind of, briefly explain what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. So cryptozoology is the study of hidden animals. That's the technical description. In Latin, crypto means hidden, and zoology is the study of animals. So by hidden animals, we mean animals that of which there is only anecdotal evidence, legends, eyewitness stories, but there's no hard physical evidence. We don't have bones, we don't have any physical remains or anything like that to study. But there is evidence that things like Bigfoot and also other things I've investigated, like the Loch Ness Monster, thunderbirds, so-called black panthers, there is a fairly convincing evidence that some of these may simply be remarkable, very rare, undiscovered animal species. And so that's kind of how I approach all of these different mysteries.
Well, awesome, Ken. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and tell us a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Phil Shaw has lived in West Branch since 1972. His first interest in Bigfoot came in 2006 when he and his wife saw a probable Bigfoot in New Brunswick on a trip to the Maritime Provinces. His interest was actually enhanced when two of his sons actually did a humorous mockumentary on Bigfoot, which was called the Shaw Bigfoot Project. Since then, Phil has documented over 142 incidents of Bigfoot activity in the 6 counties around West Branch, which can be seen on his YouTube page, which is Phil O News 1. So, Phil, thanks for sitting down with us.
Well, thanks for talking.
So I had mentioned that your first belief in Bigfoot happened in 2006.
Yep.
And you had told me you were driving along the highway and you and your wife had saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And your little one-liner was that you knew it was Bigfoot because you and her had never agreed on anything else, right?
That's what the boys said.
So since then,
Yeah.
what has your experience like and what kind of different encounters have you experienced?
Well, I think probably the part of it is the number of stories out there of things that correspond with all the books I've read. I've read 106 Bigfoot books, probably got 500 to go. But I've also been in the woods where along the river they've thrown rocks into the river by me. I've heard them walk in the river and talking, I think, at midnight type of thing. One time they broke a tree off by me when I was by myself. When I walked out the trail and here's a broken tree. One time I was camping up by Luzerne with 3 other guys and I think I got hit with a pine cone.
Huh.
And the other 2 guys were at the campfire and the other fellow was holding a flashlight for me. So, we were a long ways, 30, 40 yards from the wood line, and there was no people. We didn't see any pickups around or anybody else. And they wouldn't have known what we were doing anyhow, but anyhow, got hit with a pine cone. So and then I recorded, I don't know if you guys listened to about 7 minutes of what I call a mad ape in Kentucky.
Yep.
And I think clearly that was, one guy wanted to say it was coy dog, but I don't think any kind of dog could have done what I was recording there. So yeah, I've had quite a few experiences actually.
What do you say, Phil, to the naysayers or those that aren't that would say you're crazy for believing in Bigfoot? What would you say?
I say read a book. Dang it, pick a book. Almost any Bigfoot book. There's some are better. Dr. Meldrum's book, Sasquatch or Legend Meets Science, probably one of the better ones. But for people to be so positive about something and not make any effort to study it.
Yeah.
I really don't care if they believe. But don't be so darn positive unless you're willing to read a book about it and study it. Because if you do any study, you're going to find out there's a lot of good stories. People that come like something like this, a lot of them got stories.
Yeah.
Of what happened to them. So, I'm positive they're out there and all over the world, but I've been studying this for going on 14 years or something like that. So
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yep.
Where do you believe Bigfoot comes from? I mean, what do you think Bigfoot is? I mean, there's a lot of speculation as to what Bigfoot as a being is. Some believe he's an ape. Some believe he's part man. I mean, what do you personally believe?
I do believe the best story that I have is if they're biblical, actually. And maybe I've mentioned to that Esau and the Edomites, Genesis 25. The twin brothers, when Rebecca was pregnant, they fought, and she was told that she was going to be the mother of 2 nations. Well, this world has had multiple nations, but if you look at it in terms of Jacob's heritage, which was smooth skin like us, and then all hairy red man like Esau was, if he in fact mixed with the giants, the Nephilim, you've got a being there. It's a biblical reference. There's no proof, but just the same, I think it's a great possible heritage. Particularly if you believe in the Bible, there's some history there that you can believe. Yeah. Of course, we've attended the United Methodist Church since we moved here, and I think that's, to me, there's the best explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Particularly when the dad said Esau would live away from earth's blessings and he would live by the sword. And that describes Bigfoot right to a T. We really enjoy, cake and ice cream and all the culture, not the whole race does, but for most of us, we are so fortunate to have comfortable homes and food and but if you had to live in a hole in the ground and eat dry roots
Yeah.
or just leaves off the trees,
Yeah.
and be almost as smart, if not smarter than us.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty sad.
It's an interesting concept too. You know, if you
Yeah,
look at the book of Daniel, you know, Nebuchadnezzar was sent out to essentially live like a Bigfoot.
Oh, did he? Oh, I missed
Yeah,
it.
there's you should look into it. There's a story about he was essentially cursed by God, and he went out for 7 years.
Oh,
It
did
says
he?
that his hair grew long, his nails grew long.
Really?
He
I'm gonna
ate
have to look at
grass.
Daniel.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
And then after the 7 years, he came back and he dedicated the rest of his life to living for the Lord. But
Oh,
it's
yeah.
an interesting concept.
Well, the thing that is interesting, if you look at several books of the Bible, the writers really condemn the Edomites.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big fight between the Edomites and the chosen people, the Jewish nation. Over the years, they really had a lot of fights. In today's age, I think the Bigfoot knows that we have terrible weapons, including a whole bunch of hunting weapons, you know, that
Yeah.
they better stay away from us, because the average reaction is start shooting, even when you only got a 22. You know,
Yeah.
it's just stupid. Got an 800-pound monster, and you
Yeah.
shoot at him with a little tiny pea shooter, and the people do that, you know, and that seems to be the natural reaction. And if he was actually threatening the person, that makes sense, but in many cases they aren't, you know.
That being said, my last question for you is this. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you mentioned it's natural reaction for when someone sees something like this. They, you know, the reaction is to become defensive, shoot at it, whatever.
Yep.
Do you feel as if going out looking or hunting for Bigfoot is possibly destroying Bigfoot's habitat and maybe could prevent the race from or the
No,
being itself
no.
or the species from growing?
I just don't, you know, certainly we've had quite a bit of urbanization, and it does take away from habitat. But it is surprising. Gabe is going to talk here another hour, and he's found a surprising amount of habitat evidence of Bigfoot in the metro areas. Many of these big cities have swamps that are ideal Bigfoot habitat. And you know, there's a lot of people really hate it when they drive through the state land. Here's these clear cuts, which there's no question it's ugly.
Yeah.
But the DNR does that to regenerate the growth, because deer, birds, Bigfoot, everything survives on young growth. My wife and I actually live in a pine forest where there's 80-foot pine trees, and the undergrowth is minimal. There's nothing, you know, deer wander through in the spring when they're really hungry and eat it, but there's really no good forage there. It's good for the tree-dwelling birds and like that, or squirrels that eat pine cones, which many of them do. But and I'm not so sure Bigfoot doesn't either. But clear cuts, they're ugly, but you usually, if it's in decent ground, in 5 years you can't see through it. You can't do bird hunting; it's too thick. And you look at the new growth, you know, be 10 foot tall and you can't see, and you got all kinds of new growth, and that's what Bigfoot eats.
Yeah.
They're herbivores. I mean, they eat everything. They eat animals too, but the herbivore feature of it, you couldn't find a better place for a Bigfoot. I often think I'm going to do more hiking and cut over areas that, you know, but I never get around. Usually when I get around to it, it's too hot and you can't really bird hunt it. And some of these really in good soils, you could have a whole family of Bigfoot laying out there, you wouldn't even know it. Nobody goes through it. No people go through it because you can't bird hunt. And it's really, in many cases, it's so thick, it's very difficult to walk in.
Daniel Perez has been involved in Bigfooting since his introduction to the subject matter around 1973 by the way of a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek. He was born and raised in Southern California. He is the author of Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, which is actually considered the Bible when it comes to the Patterson Gimlin film. And in 1988, he authored Big Footnotes, which is a 188-page bibliography on the subject matter. He's also the editor and publisher of the Bigfoot Times newsletter, which has been publishing its bulletin since January 1998. He is 100% convinced that Bigfoot is a living species in North America that is largely unknown to the scientific world, and he has lectured at numerous conferences and made a few appearances on television. His website is www.bigfoottimes.net. Daniel, thanks for sitting down with us.
You're welcome.
So I just wanted to kind of get to know a little bit more about your belief in Bigfoot. Obviously, it started at a young age back in 1973. You were inspired by this movie. Since then, what has kind of your experience been, with Bigfoot and Bigfoot hunting, and what kind of encounters have you had?
Well, let me tell you one story from about 1979 or 1980. I always keep mixing up those dates. Probably 1979. So activity was happening in Hemet, California, and you could think of Hemet, California in between San Diego and Los Angeles. So we developed a rapport with the people that it was happening to, but back in the late 70s, early 80s, everything was a landline phone. There was no mobile phones. So we thought we would go see these people and find out what the latest was in terms of Bigfoot activity in their area. So we knock on the door, and nobody was home. And it had rained quite a bit in that area. And in that area, there were no paved roads. It was all dirt roads. And some of the dirt roads were rutted in the sense that if you were to drive a vehicle, it would be easy to get stuck. And so the guy that was with me, who actually drove, his name was Doug Trapp. And so I said, now what? And I said, well, why don't we just look around in this area, because this is where these sightings and footprints were happening. And so we just stumbled around, and I told Doug, I said, Doug, you probably should stop your car and we should get out on foot and just walk, because if anything that's bad's going to happen, we're going to get your car stuck and we're not going to be able to get it out. So he agreed upon that, and so we started walking around and walking into like some treed areas where a little creek was. And I'm thinking about maybe 10, 15 feet away, we're both looking at the ground, and I think we saw it at the same time. There were tracks. And so I'm still a teenager at the time, and this was my first exposure. And it had rained, so those tracks had been kind of washed on, but they were still nonetheless big tracks that, to my memory, were about 17 inches long with a big wide heel that seemed to be about 3 or 4 inches wide at the heel. And so we started looking around, and we could kind of make sense of where this thing had walked. And Doug had some plaster in his car, and so we tried to make a plaster cast. We did take photos before the plaster castings, but the plaster was, I think, already had moisture in it, so it didn't do a very good job at setting up, and it just crumbled away. So we didn't get a casting, so that was, I guess, our fault. I was never expecting to see anything. But that kind of, at that point in my life, it kind of reinforced the idea that there might be something out there, because we thought about it on the way home. We had no idea that we were going to park the car there. We just decided to do it. It wasn't planned. So it's not like someone would have planned those prints and say, like, they're going to stop the car here, they're going to look here.
Right.
We didn't, it was just an afterthought.
Right.
So in terms of someone saying, oh, someone planted those tracks and you just conveniently walked up, and I said, there's no possible way, because we didn't even know we were going to be there.
Right.
So that was my first exposure to what we would call physical evidence in the ground, tracks. And so that kind of, again, reinforced my idea. And so 1980 comes along in the summer, and it was going into my senior year in high school. And the now defunct Texas Bigfoot Research Society was going up to Northern California to the Patterson-Gimlin film site, which they never found, by the way. And I wanted to go with them, and they allowed me to go with them. And as we made this tour up through California, my first time up in that part of the country, we camped in an area called Happy Camp. And this was a campsite that didn't seem to have a lot of people in it. In fact, the way that I remember it, it was basically us and maybe a few other campers. I don't remember. But it was pretty warm. I was sleeping in a hammock outside. And the way I remember it, I had the zipper on my sleeping bag open because it was so warm. And so that night, one of the guys in our crew, because it wasn't just the family, there was other people that were from Texas with us. They came and kind of woke me up. They said, wake up, somebody's throwing rocks. So we're in a heavily wooded area in a campground. And it was hard for me to wake up because I was in a pretty sound sleep. But I did wake up, and he said, somebody's throwing rocks. And so I'm trying to process this information, and then I hear a thud on the dirt, and I said, it really woke me up because I could hear it, that something was being thrown. Got out of my sleeping bag, and the impression I got was that somebody was throwing rocks from a good distance, and the impression I got, having played baseball, is that those rocks were coming in underhanded, like this, being lobbed like this. Because you could see it as the rock was landing within the 5 feet. And it was interesting because it was dark out, and these rocks were landing very close to us, but not hitting us. And so I started laughing because I thought it was just ridiculous that someone would be throwing rocks, and I thought maybe it was a prank.
Yeah.
And so I had seen on In Search Of, the long defunct television series with Leonard Nimoy narrating, that one of the people that was interviewed on the show said something like ook ook, because that was a native language of Bigfoot or whatever. And I just remembered that. I never really gave it any thought, but I remember yelling out in the woods from the campground, ook ook. And then what came back was this long, drawn-out grr. You could just think of it with a G, a lowercase g with a bunch of R's, just grr. And then it went quiet, and that was it. Everything stopped. No more rocks. We never saw anything. We never saw who was throwing the rocks. The next day, we went up to look, but as that stopped, I was still thinking that someone was playing a prank on us, so I surveyed our party, where we all accounted for, and everyone, some of the people were sleeping in the Chevy Suburban wagon with the seat folded down, and they had sleeping, and I said, yeah, there they are, they're all there.
Yeah.
And so to this day, in that area, I don't know what was throwing the rocks that were the size of about a baseball, but someone was throwing rocks, and I'm open to the possibility that it may have been a Bigfoot, because I don't know any other animal in the woods that could throw rocks.
Right.
And it didn't scare me. It was kind of surreal that something like this could be happening. And so that kind of, again, I wouldn't say it was Bigfoot, but my other option was like, what else could it have been? If it was a person joking, we would have found that person, I think, because we went up to, the way I remember it, this is a long time ago, 42 years ago, we went up with flashlights on that hill, kind of looking around, nothing. So I said, I don't know. It just remains a mystery to me. But that, again, kind of sucked me into the research and investigation even more. So then I became a lifelong Bigfooter.
Interesting. So you had mentioned you know, a little bit about people playing pranks or people setting you up. You know, in the Bigfoot community, I know that, you know, because you believe so strongly in Bigfoot, there's a lot of naysayers, haters, if you will, people that, you know, what would you say to the people that say, "Oh, you're crazy, Bigfoot doesn't exist"? What would you say to them?
Well, anymore, nothing, because I don't want to waste time on that aspect.
Good answer.
I'm 100% convinced that they're out there, and I mean, if you look at the wolverine as a species here in North America, most people don't even know what a wolverine is, much less having seen one in the wild. And they're such a rare animal in North America that you almost never see them. And that the one that was seen last year, I want to say in the state of Idaho, that one had crossed the road and they got a picture of it, and it's such a big deal to see one that it made the newspaper.
Yeah.
And so that just tells you, the rarer the animal in terms of population, the less likely people are going to see them. And if you have Bigfoot out there that is a very small population, it's not like people are going to see them all the time.
Right.
And so because of that, there's a certain segment of the population that thinks that there's nothing out there. This is all imagination, myth, hoax, whatever.
Going off that, because there's such a small population, would you say that potentially hunting or trying to find Bigfoot could be harmful to the species instead of letting it just kind of remain in its habitat?
No, because if you take one example out of the population, then you've gone from hundreds of years of collecting evidence to one data point that would go beyond evidence, that would be proof. If someone were to get a body, then all the evidence accumulated saying like, oh, that evidence really was what we thought it was, and this specimen, this holotype, is the proof that all of these previous reports were for real. So I don't think taking one out would be a bad thing or it would affect the population, but then again, to be honest with you, I don't know. But that's not going to stop a poacher from going to kill a deer or a bear or any other animal out there.
Right.
So it's not like even if there were laws on the books that said that you can't kill a Bigfoot, that's not going to stop a poacher.
Right.
He's going to go out and do what he wants to do.
Right.
So that argument, in a sense, to me is like non-existent.
Okay, cool. And then where does Bigfoot come from, essentially? You know, I've heard there's a lot of different ideas. I'm not as educated in Bigfoot. I mean, what is Bigfoot? I've heard people that say it's an ape. I've heard people that say it's a mammal. People that say it's even a branch of human, of a Neanderthal.
Well,
what is Bigfoot?
What is Bigfoot in the sense that there's a lot of people, because we don't have a specimen to study or to take genetic samples or any of that, the question is wide open. And so I would back up and I would say our best guess for the moment is it's a primate like us, because we are primates. And I would just leave it at that, because if you were to go further down the road or farther down the road, it's just a guessing game. If you were to say it's an ape, part of the ape group, part of the human species, that's your guessing. And I would say just until that time comes, the best answer is to say, I don't know, or more than likely it's just a primate that's in the group that we're in. And that should be enough, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to take a picture of you 500 feet away and someone would say, okay, zero in on her shoes. Are those Nikes or New Balance or what?
Yeah.
And it's just like, I would say, I don't know, but it does look like he's wearing shoes.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair answer. Now, I have also heard that some believe that Bigfoot kind of has very high intelligence, and even to an extent, I've heard some believe it has supernatural powers. Do you believe that at all?
I believe that in terms of intelligence, the natural intelligence, because if you're born and raised in the woods, that everything it does in the woods is natural to it, but because we don't live in the woods on a daily basis, that some of the things that it does are foreign to us, and it's just like, to them it's perfectly natural, and to us it's just like, oh, that's, if we were to observe that behavior, we'd say like, oh, that's probably a good way of going about life in the woods.
Yeah.
But in terms of supernatural or those types of paranormal, I just don't understand how people latch onto it. Perhaps they're coming up with these ideas to explain the data. I think it's a cop-out.
Yeah. And so Bigfoot, you believe, is geographically North America, correct?
Yeah, in fact, anywhere where you find deer population, and pretty much deer are scattered throughout North America, Canada and the United States, from Florida to Maine,
Yeah.
California, down to up to British Columbia, up to Alaska, you've got deer. And so the Bigfoot population would probably overlap because that is a food supply for them.
Yeah.
And with the BFRO database, the website, up and running and has been since about 1995, and all these reports that are mentioned in there, as the late John Green noted, once you start to look at all this data, it becomes apparent that Bigfoot is a massive predator of deers. And you start to think about it in terms of the caloric needs of an animal of that size, especially in the wintertime. Yes, you're going to need a massive amount of calories to stay alive.
So all over North America is where Bigfoot resides, you know, whether it's Florida, Texas. But what is, would you say, kind of like the habitat of Bigfoot? Where are they drawn to? Because, if you look at certain animals, they're drawn to a specific setting. Deer, they live often in very wooded areas. What is kind of the Bigfoot ideal habitat, if you will?
Here's the thing. It's just like, I don't know if there's an ideal habitat for them because they're seen all over. I mean, they've been seen bumped up right next to small towns, and it's just like the only reason I could figure that you're having, say, in the state of Michigan, these small town encounters on the outskirts of town that are still wooded is that they're coming in one of two things, perhaps curiosity and one, food, because there are reports where these things have been seen in trash dumps looking for food. And so in terms of its ideal location, I don't even know if there is one, because it seems like the Bigfoot mystery would have been solved a long time ago if they lived just in one spot or one geographic pristine location for them. I just get the impression based on the data that they're continually moving around, and I think it has a lot to do with food supply. That they said, okay, we're done here, let's move on to the next area where the deer population is big, and if that deer population happens to be right next to a small town, that's where they want to be because that's where the food is, or where there's nuts and berries on the trees. I wouldn't say it's a crapshoot, but the food supply and water is going to dictate where they are going to be.
Now, are Bigfoot, are they carnivorous? Are they omnivores?
Probably just like a bear. I'm probably willing to eat anything that it could gobble up. There's a report from Georgia, and this goes back many years ago, where the Bigfoot was seen that was going back to a residence. The people that live there are since passed on, but where this thing had opened some dog food and was eating the dog food. And in fact, the owner said that the dog food seemed to vanish, and the impression was that the Bigfoot was eating it.
And then my last question for you would be this. You discussed how you had multiple times early on that you were kind of drawn in to discover Bigfoot. What would you say was the one moment that really had you sold on it, if you will? The one moment where you were like, I'm all in, I 100% believe.
I don't think I could identify one moment, but I could identify with the PG film, which I was fascinated by, the Patterson-Gimlin film, and not just watching it many times, but after Renee DeHinden died in 2001, there was a lot more study on the film by Bill Munns and some other people and some other studies that actually freelancers that have posted stuff up on YouTube that are making these points about the subject in the film, and it just, all the information I'm seeing, it made me completely sold on the idea that the PG film is 100% real, and if the PG film is real, then Bigfoot is out there by process of deduction. So it wasn't just one thing, because, I mean, if I were out in the woods and saw a very good trackway, I would be sold on it, but that's never happened.
Yeah.
The trackway I've seen were degraded by rain and possibly a couple of days, so they weren't the best tracks, but they were tracks. But I think if I saw tracks, really good tracks, I would have been 100% sold, or a close-up sighting 100% sold. But I've never seen one, so I don't know. I don't know in the sense that, well, I'm confident they're out there, but it's just like, I would like to see one. I haven't, but, you know, seeing one would be, again, it would reinforce your idea that you already have.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sitting down with us, and I want to thank you for your time. And
Very good.
It's great to learn a little bit more from you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, my name is Don. My wife and I live over in Hale. My story's, it's really short and simple. Took my daughter's cat one morning in late February, took my daughter's cat in to have him snip. And I was feeling really bad about that. And driving back, it was still early morning because you get the cat there early and then you can take him home. You don't have to spend the night. So I'm driving back and the sun's up. And I'd been telling my wife for a couple of months that I wanted to get a Bigfoot cutout to put in our yard, you know, off to the side of the woods. You see them around here and there. And I'm driving down the road. I'm familiar with the road, familiar with the area. I even had permission to hunt for years across the street from where I seen the thing. I had permission to hunt that property for years. And I'm driving along, and I just happened to, my window was kind of frosted up. It was one of the coldest mornings of the winter. And I saw what I thought was the most awesome, hugest, detailed Bigfoot cutout you could possibly see. I was like, holy crap, this thing's going to cost me $200 to reproduce, because it was so big. That one fellow was talking about, the one what I saw was all a 9 foot, and its hands were down like this. It had its back to me, and thinking back, because I've thought about it a lot since then, what it was doing, there was a ray of sun that was coming through the trees, and knowing what I know, it was standing there like this, soaking up the sun. I believe because it was so damn cold. I mean, it was cold. It was like 8 or 10 below zero that morning. And but I thought at the time that it was a Bigfoot cutout. That's what I thought it was. And I thought, I'm going to turn around and take a look at that. And then I thought, no, I'll go get her out of bed and then we'll go together. And then I got up to the next mile road. I said, no, I'm going to go look at that. So I turned around and I'm driving back, and like I said, I'm familiar with the area, and I'm looking right where I know it was, and I don't see it. And I'm still not putting 1 + 1 = 2. I'm still thinking I saw a very detailed Bigfoot cutout. And then it hit me. It's gone. It's not there. Whatever this was is not there. And we had just gotten snow. There was 2 or 3 inches of fresh snow. And looking back, I should have got out of the truck. I didn't want to trespass because it's hunting property, and I've met the people that own the property, and property boundaries are, you know, sacred for hunting property. But I should have gone, because I know there would have been tracks. We had just gotten fresh snow, and it would have been easy to, I mean, there would have been awesome tracks. It was the kind of snow that it would have, you know, there would have been easy to track it. But when I realized it wasn't there, I slowed down, and I'm inching forward. I got my passenger window down. I'm heading the opposite way that I was when I first seen it. And back in it's a cedar and conifer, it's a conifer swamp, cedar and spruce and some hemlock, and it's quite thick. At the ground level, like if you bend down like this, you can see to the back wall, but you stand up like this, and it's hard to see 15, 20 feet. This thing happened to be standing in a pathway that the property owners had cut to gain access, I assume, from the road. There's even a little drive in there, like where they pull a quad runner off the road and then walk, so they don't have to walk through the swamp when they go back to their blinds. That's what this was for. And that's where the sun, so when it was standing there, it was kind of facing the southeast, I guess, in the winter when the sun was that far to the south, and the sun was hitting it right in its face. Obviously, thinking back and looking back, that's exactly what the thing was doing, was standing there like this. But I guess my point, or the thing that struck me, was the size of it. We have 9-foot ceilings at my house, and I was telling my wife the thing would have a hard time standing up in our house. And like the first fella that spoke earlier, its hands were down here like this. And I remember, because it was just a fleeting glimpse, and you got to remember, I didn't think I was looking at a Bigfoot. I thought I was looking at a very detailed Bigfoot cutout that I wanted to reproduce myself. So and then just like your arm, the hair on your arm just stand up, when I think about it, it still does it when I think about it. I've been interested in Bigfoot since I was a little kid. We listened to that How to Hunt on YouTube, and several, all the popular ones. Never in a million years did I ever think I would see a Bigfoot. I never thought I would. And I'm 100% convinced of what I saw. It's not your typical Bigfoot country. It's farm fields. But there's a little swamp that runs north and south, and I believe the thing was traveling up that swamp, so it didn't have to expose itself. And plus, it's cold. It was bad that morning, But I guess that's it. I still don't have my Bigfoot cut out either. That was February, I'm going to say 21st, 22nd of February of this year. Just this year. And as a crow flies from this spot, 23 miles, maybe, as a crow flies. Okay? Thank you. Yeah.
I shared with Phil a picture, me and my son, on the map, Aranet County. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with where Turner, Michigan is. Phil, is there any way I can email you this picture on my phone to get it up, to pull it up on the TV, any possible way? Man, I was showing some people here close. We were... That's the only way I'm going to be able to do justice. It wasn't a sighting. It wasn't anything other than me, my son, and one of his buddies were down by the riverbank. We were having a fire that evening. Just decided to just kind of just relax. My mom owns 80 acres on the Augrey River, so it'd be right about 4 miles west of Singing Bridge. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. And there was a footprint in the riverbed, and they were down there playing, and I was doing something else. I was messing with the fire. But I looked down there, and I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, hey, there's a footprint right by there. And my son looks at it, and he's like, whoa, he kind of gets all weirded out by it. Of course, I'm like, you guys are fooling with me. I said, which one of you is, run around barefoot? This is about 3 weeks ago, so it was still in the mid-40s, very cold. And they're like, Dad, no. We didn't do it. So this is a picture of what I took. I'll show you. Let's see. I don't know. Maybe I can just pass my phone around if that's fine.
I think if you just describe what you've seen, it'd be good enough.
Okay. It's got five digits on it. It's you can kind of see what I've done a lot of research on this. I'm kind of a Bigfoot crazy freak. It's got like a mid-tarsal break almost, but it was only maybe this big. And the next couple steps, or the step, went into the river. And so whatever it was came up on the bank, was fooling around maybe for a step or two. My son found another one where you could see the foot actually slide down into the river. And I believe that they probably, in order to stay undetected, will travel the riverbeds, because our property's been there a lot of years. My uncle thinks I'm crazy. He's like, dude, we got bear everywhere. I said, that's no bear track, Al. And so It was just an interesting, I don't know, like I said, it was fascinating to me. But this was only about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, 3 weeks ago in Turner, Michigan. So I don't know if you guys know where the All Gray River goes over Turner Road right there. My mom owns that first farm on the right-hand side.
And you guys from California might find it hard to believe that 3 weeks ago it was still cold.
It was, what was it, Cade, 45, 50? For someone to be running around barefoot at this time would be crazy because it was cold. But I looked at them, I said, you guys are messing with me. No, Dad, I promise. So that's my story. We've never had any of that. We got a picture of an odd tree structure, too, with I think, complete X on the property. Actually, our neighbors across the river that I took in there, too. We've never had sightings or anything, or odd sounds, what I would consider odd sounds. And before my dad passed away, he told me a story about one time him and his buddy were in the woods, and there was something that was grunting and making loud noises at him. This was probably about, my dad passed away 5 years ago, so it's probably about seven years ago. And he knew I was fascinated with Bigfoot, so he called me first right off the bat. He's like, something was making noises at us. My dad had grew up here, and he was never afraid of anything. But he said that him and his buddy actually went and got guns because they were concerned with whatever it was either hurt or extremely dangerous. And like I said, my dad grew up in this area his whole life. They went back, and whatever it was gone about 30 minutes later. But it was like, actually, he said it was like grunting at him. Grunting, danger, and it's very thick pines back there. You can't see anything. It's kind of the same thing. If you bent down like this, you could, but if you stand up, it's just all thick pines. So, I don't know. Believe what you want, but that footprint was really quite interesting, I thought. So,
We've had several sightings in the All Gray.
and and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Alabaster Swamp, but that's over by the National City. That's like 6,000 acres of just basically state land, and it's really, really swampy. And so, like,
Next to the gypsum plant.
yeah, they call it. Yeah,
Last year we had Scott with some really good structures right there.
yeah. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Szilagyi has had a lifelong curiosity of all things strange and unusual. He has had an early obsession in his life with UFOs, Bigfoot, and some personal experiences that he's had with paranormal activity has fueled his passion for higher strangeness. With that, his love for discussion and drive to hear others' encounters led him to hosting his own podcast, which is titled Uncomfortable. You can find it on all streaming platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, and many more. And to date, it has been heard in all 50 states and internationally in over 50 countries. So, Eric, we are glad to have you speak with us today.
Appreciate you having me in here.
Yeah, not a problem. So we kind of wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive and figure out kind of, how you started to believe in Bigfoot, where that's taken you so far, what your experiences have been. So I guess that would be my first question is when did you kind of first believe in Bigfoot?
UFOs kicked in at about 5. Bigfoot was probably between 7 and 8 years of age. And my first experience with it was pretty much seeing a photographic still from the Patterson-Gimlin film,
right,
in a library book, and I don't know, nothing ever looked fake about it to me. And then flash forward to 1977, that would have put me at 12 years old, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. They actually showed the Patterson-Gimlin film in its 36-second entirety, or whatever it was, maybe 56 seconds. And there was, a lot of people look at that and say, that's a guy in a costume. And when I looked at it, even though it was, at the time, there was no stabilization or anything like that. So what you saw was literally him jumping off the horse, running, trying to find some place to prop the camera up, and then finally get a couple of seconds of steady camera footage. There was just never anything about it that to me did not look organic. It just always felt true to me. I get somebody looking at something. You see stuff on YouTube all the time, and there are things that feel organic to me, and those make me take pause and say, well, I want to dig a little deeper into this. And then there's others that's like, no, come on, somebody's playing a hoax here. The fact the fact that I feel myself as a relatively intelligent person, well educated, and not prone to fantasies or making up crazy ideas, I kind of had to believe myself, believe my own gut that there was something honest and true about it. And I'm going to be 57 here next month, so I've spent the majority of my life. I'm not a boots on the ground investigator. I don't take my weekends and put on the hiking boots and go out looking for it. But what I realized about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago is I think my strong suit is speaking with somebody who has had an experience and being able to draw out some detail that they don't even know they really remember. And that's just through the conversation of doing the podcast. So
Playing off that, I mean, you'd mentioned, going out and hunting. From the stories that I've heard, it's almost as if when someone does have an encounter with Bigfoot, they're never really looking. It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's kind of a fair assessment?
yeah, I think if you go out looking for it and you do what, like any of these TV shows that are produced and have personalities in it, they're out there, they're doing whoops and they're doing tree knocks and they're doing all kinds of stuff to try to elicit a response so that they can record it. I think having talked to a lot of people and read a lot and listened to a lot, it seems that people who just go out into the wooded areas and just do your thing. Just go there, and if you're out there to fish. If you're out there to relax and then do a campfire with your family, that's when it seems like those types of things start to make themselves known.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you're out there with the intent of trying to elicit a response, they don't want nothing to do with it. Now you talk about hunting, and I hunted for a while, and this would have been in my mid 40s. I hunted a very small piece of property. It was very, very narrow and very long, and it was right outside a high school area, to be honest with you. It butted up against a piece of farm property, and I did not have permission to hunt the adjacent property. But it was a really interesting piece of property, and for some reason I would sit on pretty much on the a few yards off the borderline of the two properties, and I would always find myself compelled to look at that property. And there was a regular woods, and then there was a strip of pine trees that was rather wide, and then he had a little bit of a worn path which seemed to be a pretty heavy game trail, and then behind that there was another short row of trees, oaks and maples, and then beyond that, and this was all a relatively short distance, beyond that there was some very tall grass and some marshy wetlands. And when you would look at the wetland area, you could see where the deer would bed down at the night, because you could see all the grass was down.
Yeah.
And it just always interested me, really, for some reason. I'm not a freak about properties, It's just, it's not something I normally like. Well, I want to go see that property. And so it was getting pretty late in the day. Had about maybe 25-30 minutes left of hunting time, and I set my shotgun down, and I left my blind. It was actually a deadfall, a tree that was really thick tree that just had fallen over, and the canopy of the tree created a very nice blind. I left my weapon there, and I stepped onto the property that I did not have permission to hunt. And I just wanted to see the property. I just wanted to walk into it. And so I started walking, and I would say I maybe got 50, 55 yards down this game trail. And as I looked up through the corner of the trees, a little opening in the trees, I could see the corner of the house. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm far enough. So I turned around and I started to walk back. And it was a slow walk. I was in no hurry. And I don't know, maybe a third of the way back to my property, I started hearing footsteps behind me. And I immediately just I stopped, And I made sure that my hands were down at my side so you could see I wasn't holding the weapon. And I was sure that it was the landowner.
Right.
And I was just waiting for him to light me up.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for him to just start tearing me apart
Yeah.
for being on his property. And he should have,
Yeah.
you know. But he didn't say anything. And I waited there for a second, made sure that I had my hands at my side, and I started walking again, slowly. And after 1 or 2 steps, I start hearing step, step, step,
Yeah.
crunching in the leaf litter on the game trail. And I stopped again. And it took maybe 1 or 2 steps, and it stopped. And at this point, I mean, I had already been into Bigfoot for a long time, but Bigfoot was not in my mind at all because I was in a very small town
Yeah.
right outside of the property of a high school where my kids went to school. And it was just, and then it hit me, and I was like, oh my God, this is a huge 12-point buck. He smells deer estrus on my clothing, and he's following me back to my seat.
Yeah.
And I was like, my heart just started pounding.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the biggest deer anybody has ever seen. I'm going to be on newspapers and magazines. And so I started slowly walking again, and I heard crunch, 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 crunch. Eventually get back to this deadfall where my gun was. And I had a bucket that I was sitting on. And I never turned around. But now I'm thinking, how am I going to reach my shotgun with the least amount of movement?
Right.
Because I don't want to spook it.
Right.
So I was able to grab the barrel of my shotgun. I pulled it up like this, flipped the safety off. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to take 1 step back with my left leg. I'm going to turn at the waist at the same time. It's going to be right there in front of me. I'm going to take the shot. It's going to be in the chest, but he's close enough it'll go through.
Yeah.
And I went, and I just barely turned, and I heard this, and I hear thump thump. And I turned, and there's nothing. There's nothing. And I'm like looking around, and I'm looking for a big white tail,
Right.
running away from me. And all I ever heard was boom boom. I heard 2. I didn't hear 4, I didn't hear 8, I didn't hear 16, I didn't hear it taking off down the trail.
Right.
All I heard was thump thump after a really, really loud exhale. And I start looking for like twigs bouncing or a leaf,
Some movement,
floating back down to the ground or something. And there was nothing.
Huh.
Absolutely nothing. And I'm like, what the hell? So, I'm all jacked up. My heart's beating really quick, and again, I'm not thinking Bigfoot at all. And I'm like, oh my God, that was the biggest deer anybody would have ever seen.
Yeah.
And so I stepped 3 steps back into the property that I didn't have permission. I had my shotgun, and I'm looking into the woods. It could have gone far because you didn't hear it running off into the distance. And I'm looking, I'm scanning, I can't see anything. Finally, I walk back. I walk out of that woods into the grassy area that's maintained. And I started walking back down the row of trees to go back to my car, which was about 125, 135 yards. And I'm walking along the edge of the tree line. And as I'm walking, I'm hearing steps in the leaves in the tree line. And I had a pretty decent flashlight. I pulled it off in my hand, shining it. And it's not completely dark yet. I mean, it's getting there, and I'm shining the light in there as I'm walking. And I can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a damn thing. There's no squirrel, there's no deer, there's no turkey, because there's a lot of turkey roost in that area. And it followed me 2/3 of the way to my car, and then it stopped. But when I got very close to the back of the garage, that the house that was on that property, that's when it stopped.
Yeah.
So it didn't go beyond that into, and it wasn't until a couple of years afterwards where I started kind of putting it together, and it's like, that's why, like with my show and, really big shows like Sasquatch Chronicles, or listening to Steve Isdall on YouTube when he reads emails from people who have had experiences, it's constant, constantly putting together what you've heard that makes sense. Yeah. And he always calls them puzzle pieces, and literally they are, because it was kind of all at once that it dawned on me. It's like, okay, so I had 2 footsteps behind me. It didn't sound like a horse trotting. It didn't,
Right.
And if you listen to a deer walk and a horse walk, it's very similar, other than the clip-clop from the hooves. When you add 2 extra legs into it, it doesn't sound like a human walking.
Right.
And this sounded like, at first, I honestly thought it was the landowner. And then I convinced myself that it was a deer, but it was always just crunch, 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 crunch. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that I kind of put it all together, and I was like, was it?
Yeah, wow.
I don't know, but when you start hearing, and I guess you can, I guess it's easy to draw a point from A to point B without it being true, but sometimes, like, the simplest answer is
too obvious.
Is the right answer. If you try to read too much into it, you're possibly missing
what's there.
So I'm not saying it was a Bigfoot,
but
it was really odd, and it does match up with other people who have been paced out of the woods while hunting.
Right.
And
so let me add on to that. I have read that some believe that Bigfoot or Sasquatch have paranormal or superpowers.
You're doing it to me,
well,
aren't you?
I have to ask you that because, one, you're into paranormal things, clearly.
Right.
And 2, you heard something and then turned around and couldn't find a trail of anything.
Right.
So, what would you say, what do you think about that?
Okay, so you're talking about the woo. That's what Bigfooters and people who are enthusiasts and interested in the subject, that's known as the woo.
Okay.
And the woo encompasses anything that is not really physical evidence, like footprints in the ground, castings.
Right.
Mind speak. I don't know who said it, but paranormal is only paranormal because we don't understand it yet.
Huh.
It's not necessarily something that is supernatural or like from beyond.
Yeah.
We just don't understand it.
We're not familiar with
the U.S. military invested millions of dollars into a project when they started using people to remote view.
Yeah.
And they spent millions of dollars on this project because it's real and it works. So we know that psychic abilities exist. So can Bigfoot's mind speak? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Can they affect how you feel when you're in their presence? I don't know if you guys were out in the audience when I was talking about the interview I did with a witch.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
And, infrasound is known in the natural world. Tigers create it with a very low frequency in their growl, and it's designed to scare you.
Yeah.
It makes you freeze.
Yeah.
That's part of their hunting.
Yeah.
They get the prey to not move, and it becomes an easier target. Not necessarily saying that Sasquatch or Bigfoot use that because we're prey, but is more of an intimidation, I think, as more of an influence to get out of the area, because that's where they are. That's what they call home.
Right.
Possibly that's a birthing area. You know, they have young ones there. I mean, who knows? But yeah, I think there is something to the woo. And you know, like you get the academics like Jeff Meldrum, and who's extremely well respected and has done a phenomenal job with, you know, the footcasts and stuff like that. And even Cliff Barackman from Finding Bigfoot, they rest on this wall of science. They lean against it pretty heavily because it's easy to back yourself up when you have proven science standing behind you.
Mm-hmm.
With the woo aspects of it, we can't really measure that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, mental telepathy doesn't leave a footprint
Right.
in the
Right.
ground. Something physical does. So how do you measure that? And I don't think you can. So I think that's why they stay away from discussing that kind of stuff. And you can't even really, I've had personal conversations with both, and you really can't even like get them off the record to talk about it because they don't have a basis to stand behind it. But you know, it's always been one of the more interesting aspects of Bigfootery to me.
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think they have attributes. You know, I guess I've said this before in some of my shows. Back when we were living out on the plains,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a fire ring, and we were sleeping around the fire and the open sky above us, and we were sleeping with one eye open because we didn't know what kind of predator
Right.
was going to come into the camp, or somebody had to stay up all night
Yeah.
to make sure that the other members of the tribe didn't get taken by a wild animal or some
Yeah.
kind of predator. That was a long time ago. We've had walls and ceilings and roofs and lockable doors and windows around us for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've lost some of our senses.
Hmm.
You know, not to say we had 6, 7, 8, 9 senses. I'm just saying
We haven't needed them.
the acuteness of our senses have been dulled because we don't need them anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if these things do exist, and I believe they do. If they're living out in the wild and they're having to, you know, I mean,
Right.
there's no evidence that these things are creating any kind of household structures. You know, there's nesting areas, there's other places that kind of give the impression of it might be some kind of a lodge, but they're not structured housing.
Right.
You know, and there's no real evidence to show that these things are known to use anything more than maybe rudimentary tools. You know, we never hear about fires in the middle of the woods where there's
Right.
nobody at. You know, we don't know that they're using fire. So I imagine that they have to be relying on their senses way more than what we do.
Right.
And they, quite honestly, you know, if you're walking into a wooded area and they're there, they probably know way in advance
Right.
that you're walking in. They probably hear their car door slam, you know,
Yeah.
from a long, long way. And I've read a couple of papers that are talking about the light sensitivity, how little bit of light over like a mile and a half away that they can recognize. Now, I don't know exactly how they know that, but I imagine it's all theories. But it's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But
My last question for you would just be, I just kind of want you to tell us a little bit about that cast, where it came from. And then after you talk about that, just what you believe Bigfoot is. Because there's a little bit of a controversy.
Sure.
I've heard that he's primate. I've heard that he's human. I've heard various things.
Right.
So just kind of what you believe, and then just tell us a little bit about that cast.
well, this is a cast from 1984, 1982, 1984, Grace Harbor, Washington, and 17 and a half inches, I believe, from the radius of the heel to the tip of the index toe. And this is out of Dr. Jeff Meldrum's cast collection. It's a second generation of it. And it is, if I might be mistaken, but I think it's one of the larger track ways that have been found. I think there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 or 300 footprints in a row where these casts were taken. I actually have a cast of each foot, one of the left and one of the right, from two different individuals. But those casts are the same individual left that track. You got left and right, left and right. So it's just kind of neat to have a part of history.
Yeah.
You know, this cast was created off of an original.
Yeah.
That came out of the ground. So
Cool.
it's a nice conversation piece. I like to have it at my table for events like this.
Yeah.
And people just want to
they'll
rub their
feel
fingers
it,
over it and say, you know, man, that's huge. So
People have a Bigfoot fetish.
yeah, they do. Weird people have foot fetishes, big or small.
Yeah.
As far as what Bigfoot is, there's a huge gap between apers and non-apers.
Yeah.
And I think when you start talking to and about the people that are in this that are more science-based, like the Meldrums and the Cliff Barackmans and stuff, I think they tend to lean more towards them being a more ape, more primate. Again, they've got that science wall that they're leaning on.
Right.
And there's precedent for it, with Gigantopithecus and Homo florensis and all the other different variations of human hominid. Excuse me. I tend to pay a lot of attention to the Native American stories about these things, and if you look into it deep enough, you'll find that throughout history, their oral traditions show that they shared the land with these things, and that they struck deals with them, and they traded food and other things. So I think they're much more. My belief is they're much more closely related to us.
Okay.
Not. I don't know. It's a tough one, because you hear the mimic. They mimic different animals, and there's reports of people who have a dog, and they're hey Spot, hey Spot, hey Spot. Every night they call Spot to come back into the house, and then they go out in the woods and they hear this voice out in the distance going, hey Spot, hey Spot. Well, they're mimicking, they're repeating. What else would be doing it? I mean, I don't know, and that's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And a lot of what they're said to be able to do seems to also relate to having
mobile thumbs.
Opposable thumbs. So, I mean, to me that puts them more in a category of being like us.
Yeah.
Are they? I don't know. It's I think it's easy to look at something that stands up on two legs, walks on 2 feet, and even though they might hunch over, or their arms might be longer, and their head is lower set on the neck, you still want to assign human attributes to it because it looks like it walks like us.
Right.
If you watch a bear can walk upright.
Yeah.
But a bear doesn't have really long arms, and it kind of waddles more than it has strides. And these things are said to have a very smooth stride to them, almost to the point where they almost look like they're on roller skates or on skis, because you don't see any kind of head bob, and it's just a very unnerving way that they move. So I think they're more closely related to us. I don't think they're a close relative, but I think they're more us than ape.
Very interesting. So. Well, Eric, I appreciate you sitting down and telling us a little bit more about what you believe. And,
well, I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Paul Berthomeu. I live in Whitehall, New York, and I've been studying UFOs and Bigfoot and various paranormal phenomena for most of my life.
And what was kind of the first thing that got you interested in Bigfoot or UFO phenomenon, things like that?
Back in 1973, there was a major UFO outbreak in this region, in the Glens Falls region, all the way down into Pascagoula, Mississippi, Coyne helicopter case in Ohio. And so we had this massive UFO flap. And up in Glen Lake, New York, there was something that landed at the La Cabana restaurant, the former La Cabana restaurant. And there's a famous photo of Jack Bergeron pointing to these two concentric circles that were sort of charred into his driveway, his dirt driveway. The hot water taps in the restaurant ran cold, and the cold water taps ran hot for about 3 weeks following the incident. So it was a very interesting UFO experience, and I became very interested in the UFO phenomena from that. And then in 1976, we had a major Bigfoot incident on Abear Road in rural Whitehall, New York. And I became interested in the Bigfoot phenomena because now it wasn't in the Pacific Northwest. The phenomenon was right here in our backyards. So we found out that there was a rich history and often underlooked in this region of stone giants, wendigos, various, Samuel Champlain talked about the gugu. So we have various historical data for the creature in this area. So in 73 and 76 is when I became involved in this type of research.
You obviously have interest in UFO, paranormal type things. Do you believe that Bigfoot is somehow or has any paranormal powers? I know there's some things that have been talked about called the woo, where he's able to have telekinesis, or he's able to vanish. What are your thoughts on kind of that?
When we're dealing with the Bigfoot phenomenon and a lot of the cryptozoological mysteries, there's an elusivity here that is hard to explain. We should have bodies, but we don't. There may be techniques, things that we don't understand yet. We just have to keep documenting. But there appears to be a connection between various phenomena. And what I would say is that at times it appears that UFOs, Bigfoot, Thunderbird, poltergeist outbreaks, all sorts of the whole smorgasbord of paranormal phenomena, there seems to be a connectivity as if these are manifestations from the same source phenomena, and we're all looking for that source.
So one of the infamous first evidence of Bigfoot would be the Patterson-Gimlin film in 1967? Yeah, 1967. That was up in Bluff Creek. So you mentioned a lot of this was in kind of the Pacific Northwest. That was the basis of it. What would you say? Obviously, there's the story of right here in Whitehall, the story of the police officer seeing Bigfoot. What are some of the different documentations or some of the more credible evidences you've seen in kind of the Northeast?
In the Bigfoot phenomena, we have what I call confirmation sightings. And that's like Cliff Sparks' sighting in 1975 at the Country Club. That's like sightings like Dan Gordon's. And not only did Dan Gordon in 1982 see a creature cross the road in front of his police car, he was with another officer at the time, who remains anonymous, who corroborated it. And he took a polygraph. There's almost nothing else he can do to further prove his story. But there was an incident that took place in 2003, and it was up in the Dresden area. And a couple of Hong Kong nationals who actually worked in town were fishing up by Dresden. And they saw this creature wading through the water at chest level. Well, I said to him, my goodness, I said, what did you guys do? And he said, well, we went fishing. The beauty of that report, the confirmation part of that report, is they were from an area where it wasn't unusual to see primate-type creatures. So they just sort of shrugged it off and said, well, we just didn't realize there were creatures in this area. Those are those confirmation sightings. They didn't really know how important their sighting was. And then you can add to that the many castings that have been made, some corroborating, being very consistent in certain areas, done by different researchers. So I think there's quite a bit of evidence that this is a real phenomenon.
What would you say to people that would say, hey, I've never seen Bigfoot, therefore I have no reason to believe it? Or maybe they view the evidence as fake, as fraud, as something that was made, for video to kind of push this narrative.
The beauty of cryptozoology is it's a win-win. For the skeptic, and the proponent. And the reason is because if the skeptic says, there's nothing to it, there's no real evidence, whatever, which is, I don't think that's accurate, but that's his opinion, that's fine, then it's important to study from an anthropological, sociological point of view as well. So the skeptic and the believer or the proponent, it's all a win-win as far as I'm concerned. This is a credible phenomena that needs further study.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Bigfoot is a polarizing topic. It's a topic that it seems it's either loved or hated, but it's polarizing nonetheless. What is your view on what type of being Bigfoot is? There's some discussion that it's a man, some discussion that it's more closely to an ape. Where do you feel like you believe that Bigfoot kind of falls in line with?
Over the 50 years of research I've done into this, because I've done it from a very early age and met a lot of established researchers like Brad Steiger and so forth, it's apparent to me that there's a connectivity between the phenomena, and that people that fall into one camp or the other, I really don't care about that. It's a matter of how the evidence is presented and collected, and I don't care where it ends up, personally. And I think that there's definitely that these could be manifestations from the same source phenomena, and we're all looking for that same source. I met Dr. Hynek years ago, the famous ufologist, and he gave a talk calling UFOs a challenge to modern science. He was talking about parallel realities, and it's very well that we may be involved into some sort of parallel reality research here. With the advent of quantum physics and talks like that, this opens up lots of doors that may start to explain some of the more anomalous phenomena that don't seem to fit into natural, flesh and blood, bone, solid evidence.
So you've mentioned a couple of different credible sources in the Bigfoot community. One of them that I've heard a lot of through multiple events is Rene DeHinden and his work on Bigfoot. Who would you say are some credible sources and people that have really searched out knowledge about Bigfoot and really researched this, that if someone who is new to the belief of Bigfoot or the study of Bigfoot, who are some people that you would recommend to maybe study their work and to view some of the things that they've done?
The Bigfoot phenomena actually has a lot of academics now involved. That years ago it was pretty much Dr. Cook from Castleton and Dr. Grover Krantz from Washington State. But now there's Jeff Meldrum. In terms of researchers, I corresponded with Rene DeHinden years ago, and of course we just lost Peter Byrne recently. So I mean, we've got a lot of researchers that spent a lot of time documenting. But there's still a lot of people out there like Loren Coleman at the Cryptozoology International Museum in Maine. He's done scores of years of research into this phenomena. There's probably not too many people more knowledgeable. Cliff Barackman, Dr. Meldrum and Loren Coleman have probably seen more castings and physical evidence for these creatures than anybody else. Seth Breedlove with Small Town Monsters has done a lot of great research with this stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of researchers out there, and I think we're in pretty good hands.
Now, obviously, with those credible sources, it makes it somewhat easier to believe. Let me ask you, have you had any sightings or vocalizations that you've experienced that you believe to be Bigfoot?
I may have been close a couple of times, but I've never had a sighting, and I've never had a physical in the presence of a vocalization report other than that could be explained. So from that aspect, I haven't experienced this phenomena firsthand.
Well, Paul, we appreciate you for your time. Let us know where would we be able to find some of your work, some of your research, and kind of where you keep folks updated about this stuff.
You can find me on Facebook. I'm at bfyeti1@yahoo.com if anyone wants to contact me in email. I live in Whitehall, so I'm easy to find. We're constantly collecting data. It's a continual process, and it's a long pattern of reports that goes way back from Algonquin and Iroquois right up to modern times. So we're always collecting this data.
So what I'm on the hunt for is from a story about a devil monkey in Danville, New Hampshire back in 2001. The story got dropped because the plane crashed into the World Trade Centers and the world forgot about it. So what I want to know is your professional opinion. Do you think that there's more than one type of ape or creature? For instance, a Sasquatch or a Sasquatch type creature with a tail. Do you believe, do you think something like that exists?
I think there's a host of paranormal, if you want to call them entities, or cryptozoological mysteries out there. There seems to be all sorts of different types of creatures, some small, some large. Lauren Coleman, I think, had documented 9 different types of hominids or hominid type, bipedal type creatures. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there's all sorts of different creatures out there that haven't been identified yet.
So my next question is, do you think they could have migrated from here in New York to eastern New England?
Yeah, sure. There could be migration routes, but there may be something else going on that we just don't understand. We do know that looking at the data, there are certain times of the year, for instance in the Whitehall area, that these creatures apparently are more populous in this region. August, September, and October seem to be the hot months. Now, we don't get a lot of reports on other months, but we do get reports for other months. In fact, Dan Gordon's, which was a high-profile case, took place in February of '82. So, but yeah, there do seem to be areas that seem to be hot spots in certain times of the year. And that may be suggestive of migration, but there may be some other factor going in that we just don't consider.
So I'm Emily. I am owner of the Forest Fleur, which is a Bigfoot research company. It started about 6 years ago when I was super interested in Bigfoot. And now my mission really is to spread awareness about this animal, this species, in order to inspire habitat conservation.
Okay. Emily, when did you first become interested in Bigfoot?
Well, Whitehall, New York is actually what got me into the subject. My grandparents had a house up in Broad Albin, New York, and my grandmother heard about Whitehall through a friend and how there were Sasquatch sightings in the area. I was fascinated and I just had to come here and find out for myself. I was about 12 years old and I begged my family to take me here. We got to see the Sasquatch statue, we got to talk to a gentleman in the local museum, and he told us all about the local sightings and reports from the area. It was an incredible experience. I took home a souvenir with me, a little carved statue of a Sasquatch, and I immediately just fell in love with the subject, and from there it just took off.
And how long have you been researching Bigfoot?
I've been researching for 6 years now. I spent most of my time in the Adirondacks starting out, spent 4 months out in Oregon learning everything I could about Sasquatch, and now I'm back in the Hudson Valley trying to find evidence there.
Great. So there's a little bit of suspicion as to what Bigfoot actually is. So I have heard some people say that it is, it's an ape. Some people say that it's more closely to a man. I've heard some people say that it's even human. What is your view on what kind of species Bigfoot is, or what it closely would relate to?
Well, evidence points us to the conclusion that Sasquatch or Bigfoot is an ape. There are 3 pieces of evidence that tell us this. There are footprint casts, right, and those show unique anatomy in the form of mid-foot flexibility. So we see something called a mid-tarsal break within these footprints that tells us that Sasquatch feet move like ape feet. We also have hair samples that are very close to human and also chimpanzees. And another thing we see is throughout these prints and also on windows and cars, Sasquatch hand fingerprints are left. And they're called dermal ridges. That's what scientists call them. So we see dermal ridges in hand and footprint casts as well as on windows after a Sasquatch has visited that area. So all of these things point to Sasquatch being an ape. They're also hair covered, they have forward-facing eyes, and they have no tail, which describes an ape species. So whether they're closer to human or other great apes is still a mystery, and we need more data to find out.
Great. So there also is a little speculation that Bigfoot has paranormal activity or paranormal powers. I've heard it referred to as the woo before. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are kind of your views on that?
Sure. I think it can all be explained away, but I certainly don't want to discredit those who have had experiences like that. I just haven't seen any physical evidence to back that up. If somebody came to me and showed me a picture of a Sasquatch coming out of a UFO, I certainly would be on board to investigate further. But right now we have tangible physical evidence that points to this species being biological, and that's what I'm sticking to for now.
Awesome. Tell me about your experiences. I know you said you had a sighting with Bigfoot. Tell me a little bit about that, some different vocalizations you've heard, kind of the evidence that you've seen or heard, and kind of what your most credible sighting or your most credible experience with Bigfoot has been.
Sure. So my first encounter with Bigfoot was on Prospect Mountain in the Lake George area of New York. I was there on the off season, early April, and I was with a research partner of mine, and at the time we were really just two friends out hiking. We weren't full-blown researchers yet, but we're walking down the road. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I said, hey, let's practice our Sasquatch calls. So we start going off with our calls, and something starts answering us, which was really incredible. So that went on for about 15 minutes, and then we got the heck out of there because we were scared. Now, if that happened to me, I would have stuck around to see what it was, but I think that was probably a Sasquatch, and what validated that were my experiences in Oregon when I was studying there for 4 months under some really amazing researchers, one of which is my research partner today. So out in Oregon, we were in the Mount Hood National Forest in an area that there had been a ton of sightings. People were casting footprints. This research group I was studying under was yielding a lot of evidence out of this area. And so they brought me along to show me. We were driving down old logging roads where we heard some incredible vocalizations. And I also had an experience where we heard some rock clacking coming from the tree line. And then all of a sudden I heard an ape-like grunt and smelled this very pungent ape-like odor. So I've had a few experiences out there, but perhaps the most amazing experience I had was seeing one in the middle of the night. It was almost midnight, and we were out on private property that we had exclusive access to. And, we're walking around. All of a sudden, we hear cracking and crunching and, quietly, but it was definitely there. Something was walking through the woods. And before I knew it, I'm staring into the tree line. The moonlight is beautiful and bright. You could see kind of in between each tree. And I see this huge man-like figure step between two trees, kind of look at us, and then walk off. It was the most incredible experience. And at the time I thought, there's no way that could have been a Sasquatch because it was too big. Yeah. And afterwards, we measured. It was about 7.5 foot, which puts it in the range of an adult male Sasquatch. But, in the moment, you can't imagine the size of them until you see one yourself.
Let me ask you this. What are some, you obviously mentioned a few researchers that you've worked closely with. Who are a couple of maybe the, if you will, Hall of Fame researchers on the Bigfoot topic?
I would say Dr. Jeff Meldrum is probably the top researcher. He is an anthropologist at the Idaho State University. And, he's a real scientist that is studying Sasquatch and spreading awareness about this species. And so I really enjoy his work. Another amazing and iconic researcher would be Whitehall's own Paul Bartholomew. He wrote the Monsters of the North Woods book, and it's all sightings and encounters of Sasquatch in the area. Paul Bartholomew is an amazing researcher. He has quite the collection. I've actually been to his personal library, and oh my gosh, it blew me away. This man has so much knowledge, and he's worked so hard to collect evidence and knowledge on the subject.
Great. How would you explain to someone how you're able to find Bigfoot and how we can kind of prove its existence?
Well, I would say proving the existence of Bigfoot is going to be a little tricky because scientists are going to want more than a body and then more than just data. They need both, right? So what I would suggest is, going out, collecting as much data as you can. If you hear of a sighting in the area, write that down or plot it on a map. And if you have your own encounters, keep track of those as well. Time of day, time of year, weather conditions, Any sort of food sources that might be spiking during that time of the year would be good to write down. Catalog that information and share it with others so that more people will come forward with their encounters and sightings, and we can collect all that data in one place. And, you know, in terms of actually finding a Sasquatch, no one has really succeeded in that yet, but people have certainly observed them for, you know, longer periods of time. I've heard stories of people observing them for upwards of 45 minutes to an hour. A lot of hunters have reported things like that. So I would say just remain quiet. Don't believe everything that TV tells you. Don't go out there banging on pots and pans and playing saxophones out in the woods. Although it's really fun to, you know, experiment and be silly, the way that you're going to find Sasquatch is by being quiet and sort of sneaking up on them, or attracting them toward you by being kind of an unfamiliar face that is becoming familiar and frequenting the same area.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for your time. Tell everybody where they can find your information and some of your research.
Awesome. Well, they can find me on theforestfleur.com. That's theforestfleur.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram as The Forest Fleur, and that's where I'm most active.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
My name's Mike from Chaos Theater. We're putting together a project called Man Ape Among Us. And where it starts is tracking the story that disappeared 20 years ago in southern New Hampshire. There's a fire chief had spotted a 8-foot monkey. Now that he said it was a monkey, jumped out of the trees, jumped back in, and people around town had spotted this thing too. They were chasing around with trail cams. They even brought out monkeys to try to draw it out. And there was a kid that was talking about having his bringing in cookies and peanut butter crackers and things. So this was about to make national news. It was all over the local news. As a matter of fact, a couple of town employees had gone to the NBC studios in New York for the Today Show. As they come back from a break, instead of going to the story, they went to the planes crashing in the World Trade Centers. So the story was dropped.
Wow.
And I want to kind of retell this story.
I love that.
And where we're at with it at this point is tracing. So, okay, I'm just going to kind of. So what I want to do is trace. It started with, okay, a monkey. And now it's, you know, these Bigfoot and these hominids and these primates. One of the things that I want to do is draw a correlation to where they might be coming from. The Adirondacks is a huge expanse of land. It's probably the largest east of the Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. And the track goes through the Green Mountains and the White Mountains into northern Maine, which is probably, it's desolate. So, what could you say to the thought of any type of migration, any relocation of these animals? For instance, when I grew up in southern New Hampshire, I didn't see bald eagles or loons. We have them, they're everywhere now. It's great. We see a lot of reforestation, a lot of the environmental impact from years ago is kind of, we're overcoming that a lot. And we see as much forested land restored in New Hampshire than we have in most any other state. So with that, a lot of animals are, we have more black bear now than we know what to do with. They're literally everywhere, and we're kind of in suburbia in Rockingham County. So what could you say to the possibility of a migration of these things coming back, maybe from our past, and just being able to flourish because we've taken those advancements to, you know, in the change with the environment?
Well, I would say that, you know, it seems that there was certainly a boom in sightings during the COVID pandemic. You know, whether that is because there were more people spending time outdoors, or there were just, you know, less people outdoors, maybe less people anywhere, and Sasquatch was, you know, taking advantage of that. That's kind of under speculation, but there was definitely a boom in sightings. In terms of migration, there's an organization called the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. And basically, they have a parcel of land that they work off of, and they're doing some really high-level scientific work. They all pitch in, they all chip in their own money, and they get really high-level equipment. Their recent experiment was to tag a Sasquatch. So they took one of those little spiky balls that fall off the trees, and they attached a tracking device to it. They tested it on feathers, all sorts of fur, bear fur, deer hide, moose. It didn't stick to anything except for human hair. So they thought, okay, well, this will be perfect to stick to a Sasquatch. They tried all different types of glues and tapes and adhesives, and finally they came up with this plant that would stick to the hair. They ended up putting it up on a wire that was at 7-8 foot range. It tripped, something caught onto it. They made sure that a mountain lion or a bobcat couldn't, they rigged it in a way that only something that large with hair would be able to carry this tracking device. And what happened was they noticed that the animal traveled within a 70-mile radius, and this was over a period of a month or 2 months. So that tells us a lot about Sasquatch, because it seems like they're constantly moving around, but within the same area. So I think there are clusters of Sasquatch. You look at orangutans, right? There might be 4 females that are miles apart from each other, but the male goes to each female and breeds with her. And so that might be why we see a lot of lone Sasquatch males, because they may be living similar to orangutans. Another theory is they may live similarly to gibbons. Gibbons mate for life, and they live in family groups of 3 to 4. So, perhaps there's a family group in Whitehall, and there's a family group in, Vermont, and then there's a family group in New Hampshire. And, when the females have a son, he then exits the family and goes on to find his own female. So that could be an explanation for, why we see certain Sasquatch during certain times of year. I do think that they migrate, but maybe not over very long distances. They probably just kind of go around the same area looking for food sources.
So you don't think there'd be like bison or American buffalo that roam for thousands of miles back and forth, say up and down the Appalachian Trail?
I think it's, I would be doubtful, only because, an animal like that, a big predator, they don't want to expend a ton of energy. And, if they have the resources they need in that area, why would they leave? It would make more sense to me if the reports were like, a white Sasquatch was seen in New Hampshire, and then New York, and then, Pennsylvania. But it doesn't necessarily happen that way, so we need more data to figure that out. But it's certainly possible that they migrate down from Canada. Perhaps maybe that's where they originated and they came down into the U.S. Who knows? We definitely need more data to find out.
Wonderful. Now, the next question I have is, do you want to hear my Squatch call?
I sure do.
Yeah. Okay. From the diaphragm, right?
I like it. That's pretty good.
I'm number 7, so vote for number 7.
Awesome.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
So, what brings you out here today? Where are you from?
I'm from next door in beautiful Vermont, and we've always wanted to come to the Squatch Fest, and this is our first year, so I'm here with some friends, and I entered Squatch calling contests, and here we are.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh, I got my competition
so,
right in front of me.
pumped.
I'm going to kick your ass, Mike. I'm
Ready
sorry.
to go. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We come from New Hampshire ourselves, kind of came out here to kind of track the Bigfoot. We found this festival, and it's really cool.
It's cool. I've never even been to Whitehall, New York before.
No, me neither.
Yeah, so it's very cool.
How long did it take you to get here?
Oh, I live over in Bridgewater, Killington, so about an hour.
All right, not too bad.
Not too
we
bad.
There on the way in.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that Route 4 was so slow.
Yeah, that's foliage season. Come on, Mike. You said you're from New Hampshire.
I
You should know
actually
that.
live on Route 4 east of Concord.
Oh,
so
man, it's
really-
foliage season. Of course it's
yeah.
packed.
So, do you believe in Bigfoot?
No, not really.
So no encounters?
No.
No stories?
Well, I do actually, Mike, have one story.
Okay.
And this happened in Reading, Vermont. I was out hiking one day all by myself, and it just became so eerily still. Something was off, something wasn't right. There wasn't a bird chirping, there wasn't a cricket humming, nothing. and then I got a whiff of something I've never ever smelled before. The stench was unbelievable, and my hair raised up on the back of my neck, and I said, you know what, I just have to get out of here. And I got out of there. So I never had a Squatch sighting. Do I believe in it? No.
Okay.
But something weird happened to me that day in the woods.
And you can't explain it. Okay. How are you enjoying the festival?
I'm enjoying the festival, Mike. It's so cool. Like I said, never been to Whitehall before. This is great. The weather gods cooperated. The sun came out. A lot of good people here, having a good time. And I will see you at 5 o'clock, brother.
Do you want to demonstrate your Squatch call for
No,
us?
I'm saving that for the big competition at 5 o'clock, brother. Yeah, nice try. I'm gonna kick your ass. I'm telling you.
Okay, all right, you got it.
All
Big
right.
boys got big lungs, right?
That's right. That's right. You got it. Although you got a few years younger than me, you probably got a little bit more in here. But whatever. So it's all good.
Yeah, tell me who you are and where you're from.
I'm Jim, and I'm from Albany, New York.
So you're a local for the most part.
For the most part, yeah. This isn't too far from my house.
So have you ever seen a Sasquatch?
I have not, unfortunately, but I would love to.
So do you believe?
I do. Yeah.
You do believe?
I don't think there's any scientific reason why they wouldn't exist. I mean, we have other things in a fossil record similar to man and other types of apes, and this seems to be somewhere between less human and human, and why not?
Do you think they come from UFOs?
I know some people think that. I'm not leaning in that direction. I think it's something from Earth, but I'm open to the concept.
So you having fun today?
Oh, definitely. I've been here before, and I always enjoy it.
What's your favorite part of the day?
I love the lectures, and I was here last year. I'm not sure I'm going to make it this year for the calling contest. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about the calling contest. I signed up. My first time
that's
here.
What that is.
Yes,
All right.
my first time here, and we come all the way from New Hampshire. Okay. And yeah, looking to have some fun, and I appreciate talking with us.
No problem. Enjoy it.
All right, have a great day.
Take care.
Yeah, if you could just tell us who you are, where you're from, and what brings you to Whitehall.
Well, I'm Steve Coles, a Squatch detective. I've been in Bigfoot research since 1998. I'm a resident of the capital area. I have been to 46 of the 50 states in my search for this thing, and I predominantly research in New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, occasionally in Pennsylvania as well.
We're from New Hampshire, so we're following a story that happened 20 years ago, and it kind of leads us here to the whole Bigfoot thing. Not sure if you're familiar with the Danville devil monkey of 2001.
I'm vaguely familiar with
Okay.
that.
So what happened was, real quick in a nutshell, fire chief saw a monkey jump out of a tree, a big 8-foot monkey, jump back. The whole town, there was reported sightings. Law enforcement, media was all over it. As a matter of fact, a couple town employees were about to go on to the Today Show during the commercial break. Instead of cutting to that bit, they went to the planes crashing in the World Trade Center, so it was dropped. So my thing is, well, if you're not familiar with it, I guess that's fine, because my connection was trying to find out if there's man-apes coming down into southern New Hampshire, the East Coast. They're going to be coming from the Adirondacks, right? I mean, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm sure that each state probably has a very small indigenous population of them. Where some of the states, can't say all of them. What I would be as an investigator and a professional investigator as well, I would be very concerned about the description of what was seen, whether or not perhaps somebody brought a primate. I would have to look at the primate laws in New Hampshire, because I'm not sure. In New York State, it's illegal to own a primate. You have to have a zookeeper's license. So that makes it very difficult.
Well, that was one of the things was it a wild, a pet monkey that escaped? Nobody came to own it or claim it, and it just...
What you're going to understand, too, is that a lot of these people will take these primates in as a baby. Then as they get older, they get harder to handle. So that may be we're just going to dump it off here and let it be.
Right, and let Mother Nature take care of it. Let me ask you: is that the film from, was it 1969?
68.
68. Is it real?
I believe there are inclinations to me that it is more real than it is fake. I know there have been some claims of people in the past saying that I don't believe their claims. However, I always remain on the fence about it, but I'm more to the positive of it than not. Because a lot of people talk about the film. What they forget to talk about is the tracks found afterwards. Right. And that's, something that people gloss over. Well, they forget about the tracks.
I figured if there was somebody to ask about that, it would be you, because you seem to do all your homework, check all the boxes. You check personal backgrounds too on the people making these claims. And what would you say is the percentage of these sightings are hoaxes?
Actual hoaxes, probably around 10%.
Oh, only 10%.
Right? Misidentifications, or probably about 30 to 40%, even 50%. And then 40%, and then probably about another 10 to 15% are kind of in the middle. You really can't determine where it lies on the spectrum. So probably the amount of I'll encounter Bigfoot is probably about around 20, maybe 25% times.
Now, do you think there's just one species of Bigfoot, or maybe a couple different?
I think it's hard enough to prove one species that a unidentified primate is walking the forest, let alone 4 or 5 or 6. There's a number of different, biological laws that would explain the differences in sizes and diversity amongst, primates itself. Sure. Bigfoot's a primate, it would fall kind of in the same diversity that we do or other primates will.
So, have you had any of your own sightings?
I have had my own sightings. I had 2 of them.
Could you tell us about those real quick?
Real quick. 2011.
Can you watch my necklace?
Have you had any of your own sightings?
I've had 2. One in 2011, and it was standing next to a utility pole, basically watching our campfire. And I was the only one to see it because I was the only one to walk to my car to retrieve some batteries. And I shone my flashlight around, and there it was, standing next to the utility pole. It stayed there until I kind of shook the flashlight a little bit and walked off, got my other team out. They found where it had walked into the forest. And while we're doing that, the base camp had basically said they heard some movement going on there.
Cool. So how are you enjoying the festival today?
This festival is one of my favorites.
Well, it's in your backyard too, right?
It is, and it's so big. I mean,
it's grown this year too, from what everyone says.
It's a lot busier than it was last year, and that's amazing because every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
So what's your favorite part of the festival?
My favorite part of the festival is its unpredictability.
Awesome. That's cool.
Because you never know what's going to happen around here. A lot of fun stuff, seeing people you haven't seen in years, meeting new witnesses.
Sure.
So that's what I love about it.
I'm sure people are coming to you with their stories and all that stuff. So.
Yeah. And you never ever want to get them in between you and your subject.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Same here.
All right, so what was your name and what brings you to the event today?
My name is Andy Gordon. My brother Dan was one of the cops that had a sighting down by the South Bay.
Okay. So tell us kind of a little bit about that sighting and kind of from, obviously you probably have a little bit more of a story from your brother's experience. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he and the other fellow cop were driving down on patrol, and all of a sudden this creature jumped off the ledge, ran across the road, then over the guardrail down to the bank, and my brother stopped the car and went out to see what it was and come back, and the other cop said, boy, that was some bear, and my brother said that was no bear. I have to believe that he saw something. Yes, definitely.
So that would make you a Bigfoot believer?
Yes.
All right. And so I'm assuming this isn't the first time you've been at this event.
Oh, no.
Being from the area.
I live here, yeah.
So what would you say is, maybe it's changed throughout the years, but what's your favorite part about this event?
Just talking with people, meeting people and sharing stories. Like I talked to a few of the investigators, and they actually had a visitation. They had a sighting out within a quarter mile where I live, out Winters Road area.
Very good. And is there anything else that you want to tell the the people at home about why they should believe in Bigfoot and what kind of compelling evidence is out there?
Well, I'd have to believe my brother that he saw something. You know, he would never not lie about something like that. He held it in for a while because he figured nobody would ever believe him.
Well, it's taboo.
Yeah, and you know, unfortunately, he's passed away a few years ago, and he always said, "Before I pass, I hope I get exonerated. Somebody finds it." You know.
Well, that's what everybody here is looking for, right?
That's right. That's right. But it's nice to meet all the people here, and I'll talk about the different events and stuff going on. It's nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir. Take care.
All right. And what was your name?
Alex?
Alex. And Alex, you said you came all the way from Cape Cod, right?
Yes.
All right. So what brought you to this event?
Actually, it's funny because I was hiking the 46s a few years back, and early in the morning I heard on a radio station this festival was going on, and it's like, wow, it's too bad I couldn't make it this year. So the next year I came out here, and now this is like my second year.
All right, great. And so do you believe in Bigfoot?
It's possible. It's possible that they exist. There's a lot of compelling testimony anyways from so many people. They all can't be lying, you know.
Right. So you've never had any experiences with Bigfoot?
No. Well, maybe one, and I don't know, thousands and thousands of hours out in the wilderness on solo kayak trips, hiking trips. Once out on October Mountain in the western part of Mass, I heard what I thought were wood knocks when there's nobody else on the mountain, and it only happened in a certain place on the mountain, and only when I stopped.
Yeah, so
that was my only experience.
Yeah, so I'm out from that area, and that's kind of our kind of claim to fame when it comes to the Bigfoot community. So what would you? Let me ask you this. I mean, first of all, what's kind of your favorite part about this event?
Oh, I just like coming to hear the speakers, and it's just a novelty to come out, you know.
Would you say that this event has changed or strengthened your experiences or beliefs in a creature like Bigfoot?
I don't know if it has or hasn't. It's more about reading all the books I've read and looking at the documentaries and things like that. This is more of, just being able to talk to people firsthand, hearing stories if I can. Yeah.
All right, great. Anything else you want to say about the event?
Nothing else. I enjoy it. It's great.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, so just start by saying your name, and then we'll talk a little bit about your experiences with Bigfoot.
My name is Brian Gosling. I'm a local here. I'm the police officer back in August of 1976 that had the up-close personal encounter out on Abear Road. And after that fact, there was people older than me at the time because I was 24. Now I'm almost 72. That came forward, and for a good month after the initial sighting on Abear Road, there were reports on a certain road, would be County Route 11 and Abear Road. Probably another dozen or so reports of people seeing things, stepping across fences you and I got to climb across. My wife and I wrote a book. It's called Abear Road, The True Story, because the original story on documentaries and books that have been written is so far-fetched and so far out of whack. They've taken the main purpose for the book we wrote is the facts, because I'm the one that had the encounter, not everybody else. My words are my words, not your words. We're still into it big time. In fact, I got a couple casts on the table over there, which is a godsend to us because we haven't come down here anything new since 1997 or 98, and that was at West Mountain. These two are from this July, and it's two different ones in the same location. A gentleman owns a camp back in here, and he's from Connecticut. He wanted us to investigate it, and we did. He called us near the end of June, and I don't know if you guys are from the area, but all the rain we had up here was tremendous. So we went down, I think it was the first week and a half of July, down in the area. I did find bear tracks that was headed down this really steep embankment. Then it goes into a marshy bog full of hemlock, 99% hemlock in there. You know what that's like walking on for us, a waterbed. And we couldn't leave any tracks whatsoever, so my wife and I were doing our investigating, and she found one on the back side of the tree, and the one I found was off the left-hand side of the tree in the front, and they're two different size tracks, and I take it as an adolescent, and a female, or excuse me, an adult. And the guy actually come up from Connecticut today because he's got a camp back there. And this all transpired while he's in his outhouse outside his camp. And he was scared to cabooders out of it. And so we went over and said, we'll do an investigation, which we did. And we actually come up with 2 casts. We've never been able to do that before. We've got a lot of casts, not here. We've only got a handful here. But to find more than one, that was a godsend, especially for the new festival. And if you want to look at the casts, you can. They're right there on the table.
Yeah, we definitely will. And so obviously your story was something that really kind of was, it brought a lot of news to the town, a lot of news to the Bigfoot community.
Yeah.
That night, I mean, what were kind of your first impressions when you saw it? I mean, what was first running through your mind?
Now, I was the second night. I was off duty, my own car. The night before I was on duty, I couldn't leave the village unless I were in pursuit or backing up a call that the troopers or sheriffs couldn't cover. And the guys that come in just happened to be my brother and a friend of his. And my dad had just gotten off duty. It was midnight or so after the fact. And they come in and told me, and I thought they were full of kapooey. And my encounter, the night I had my encounter, the trooper that was out there with me, he was on duty. He was probably 2,000 feet away from me or so, up on top of a hill, out in a field a little bit, 50 feet off the road, where I was 400 feet or so out in a field that hadn't been mowed that year by the farmers. My first thought was, you got to live it with me, because something told me to turn my spotlight on now. Something just told me to do it, and right off the kitty corner of my car, here's this creature standing there, 7.5, 8 foot tall, 400 pounds, maybe more, maybe a smidgen less, staring at me. And as soon as I hit it with my spotlight, it brought his hands up like this and put his head back and just let out such a deep, guttural, from the bottom to the top of the scale. And it lasted probably 10, 15 seconds. And at 30 feet, I guesstimated it was 30 feet. It was just like me blowing a tuba right directly in your face. I could feel it in my chest. I had my hand up, the hammer pulled back on the gun, and all I could hear in my head, believe it or not, is, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm not going to hurt you. And while all this is going on, I'm standing there looking at something that don't exist. I didn't go out as a complete non-believer. Why should I disbelieve my brother, his friend, my father, who was a sergeant here in Whitehall, 2 New York State troopers, 2 deputy sheriffs that all saw it? Why should I doubt them? But I went out for my own curiosity, and it's the trooper that went out with me, and he was on duty, went out for my own curiosity, and thank God I stayed where I did. For months and months and months after that, we were all made fun of, and you know, and these same guys that are made fun of me are some of the, not the festival, but different things we used to have in the park, whittling little Sasquatches and all that stuff, making money off it, see. And I embarrassed one guy so bad that the people that were buying things put them right back down and walked away from the table. I said, there's one of the guys who used to make fun of me all the time, and the rest of the family. But anyway, you'll hear the whole complete story at 4 o'clock. I'll relive it again. I'll never forget it. Right from the instance I left that road and get out in that field, the whole 9 yards, it's etched up here forever.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for telling your story.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Your name and where are you from?
So my name's Kason Claremont, and I actually come right outside of Saratoga Greenfield, just south from here, an hour.
Okay, an hours away, so you're kind of local.
Yeah. This is my 4th time coming to the Sasquatch Festival. Yeah. Me and my family over there, we make it a yearly thing to just come down. And my brother actually there's the Bigfoot Squatch man right here.
All
so
right.
He comes down, he drags us down here every year. We love it, absolutely love it.
Have you seen a Squatch?
I've not seen Squatches, but however, I'm talking to like people like Steve and all the evidence that they have with the pictures. I mean,
any run-ins, any things that you think that could have been a Squatch? Or?
I mean, we hear some weird noises in the back of our house. We're all surrounded by woods, you know, and Greenfields, the crazy things go up back there. So you don't know if it's a Sasquatch or...
Well, you got a lot of wilderness out here.
Oh, absolutely. Hills and whatnot.
So I can imagine that all kinds of critters.
Yeah, I don't blame them. You know, up in Whitehall, too, it's beautiful over here. I mean, just over there, you know, the hill, and it's changing colors and whatnot.
So how are you enjoying the fair today?
The fair's great. You know, all the vendors here. There's so many vendors. You know, the last time there wasn't this many vendors. I'm excited for the calling contest today. We just have the
number 7. I'm number 7.
number 7.
Yes.
All right, where do I sign? I'm gonna sign up today.
Sign up right on this outside row. One of those. Yeah, you can't miss it. They're wearing pink shirts.
Yeah, no, I gotcha.
Yeah, sure, have fun.
I'm excited.
Have you seen a Squatch?
Sadly, no.
No.
No. Well,
Come here.
So what do I do?
Just talking to him.
Yep, just talk into it.
Personally, no. One time I thought I did, but it was just a motorcycle. But honestly, I thought it was for time being. I still don't know what it was, but I was chilling out back on our little deck, right? And I just hear this noise. It's like a loud noise. Sounded like it was coming from the woods, but it also sounded like it was from the road as well.
Sure, yeah.
It was like this loud, prolonged noise. It went on for like a good 15 seconds.
And then once we hear that, we give calls right back. We actually practice calls.
Yeah.
Can we give you a few?
Would you give us a couple calls?
Yeah.
Right.
Here,
All
you
right.
do yours, and then I'll do mine. Oh, see, now I don't think I can top that. Here, I'll try mine.
Come on, bro. Come on.
Yeah. I gotta warm up for the contest this evening, you know?
Definitely sign up.
Yeah.
So how you enjoying the day? Good. You have
Oh,
fun?
it's beautiful. Yeah, it's a beautiful
What's your favorite
day.
part?
My favorite part is just meeting all the people and all the
Yeah.
information that they have. You know, it's
Yeah.
just it makes me one step closer to thinking that there is a Bigfoot actually out there.
Do you hunt and go out?
I don't have time for that. No.
A few times.
We've been invited by some of the people here.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Find somebody to
I know, right?
Yeah. How about like hunting, deer hunting, fowl hunting, any of that stuff?
I've gone hunting a few times with my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
So far, nothing out of the ordinary.
We like shooting porcupines at the
Yeah,
trees.
shoot
Yeah.
porcupines, Sometimes hunt deer.
Okay.
Uh-huh. We practice, so one day when we find that Sasquatch, maybe we'll just have him laid out in for a hood.
Now let me ask you, what if Sasquatch didn't want to be found?
Sasquatch didn't want to be found.
Yeah.
Well, as my shirt, he's ready to hide. He's always hiding, So it's just a matter of when,
One thing I'm concerned about is if they find a Bigfoot and they label them endangered species, and then what happens? They're probably gonna not be.
Well, if it's an endangered species, hopefully, he'll be in like a nice area where we can go and hang out with him and say hi,
Cool.
See what he's been up to all these hundreds of years when we're trying to look for him,
Who knows? He might share a story or two.
Yeah. Love to hear his human sighting stories.
Absolutely, yeah, of being scared of us, hiding from us, because most of the time, we're scared of Bigfoot. What was that in the woods, But
I know black bear. We get a lot of black bear where we're at, and they will run as soon as you yell at them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you think Squatch might be that.
He's got to be. He can't be that much of a people person.
No.
No.
He's got to have a brain similar to ours if he's hiding this long.
You would think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would actually at least assume.
Maybe he's hiding for a reason.
He actually could even be smarter than us, actually. Come to think about it. If he's been hiding for years upon years, like, this is around good 60 years he's been hiding.
Sure.
And we only know so much about him.
Right.
So there's a chance that this could actually be smarter than us.
Well, if you think about it, if their brain was focused on pure survival and staying hidden, they don't need to learn, social media.
They don't.
To drive through at McDonald's.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Dunkin' Donuts order. They have all that extra RAM space, I suppose, right, in their brain to kind of do.
Yeah, just what berries, Don't let them sit on the toilet for too long, Don't eat the red berries. So.
Well, guys, thank you so much.
Hey,
for
thank
talking
you.
to me
I
today.
appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having
absolutely.
us.
And
Good luck.
yeah, go sign up. Yeah.
I will see you
yeah,
out
definitely.
there.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, thank you guys.
So what brings you to Whitehall?
Well, the Sasquatch Calling Festival, of course.
Yeah, have you seen a Bigfoot?
I have not, but I am a strong believer, and so is my friend.
I have heard, but not seen.
Not seen.
Not seen.
So you believe they're out there?
Absolutely.
How about UFOs? Do they come down from UFOs?
I believe that they hide in the woods. more a portal than a UFO per se.
Portal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe they hide. They hide.
Now, you guys have a Squatch call?
We're working on one. We're working on one. We're formulating one. We're getting in the
You're not
spirit.
signing up? You don't have a name tag?
What I heard was you have to just call the Squatch from within. So we were going to practice on the way up. We have had a long journey here, about an hour and a half. Not as much as other people that I have heard. It's a worldwide festival. However, I'm ready to channel the Squatch from within. So I didn't want to practice. I needed my voice ready.
It has to be authentic.
Okay, so you're not prepared to give us a Squatch call? Can you bring your mic up? Mine up? Yeah. Okay, I'll just talk into mine too. That way we're all doing it.
I'd be willing to give a little, not at full volume.
Okay.
Okay, back it up a little. Don't want to blow anybody's ears out. Okay. A little mini warm up. Thank you.
I love it. I freaking love it. What more is there to say other than Sasquatch is real?
Squatch is around, it's local, it's here, it's alive. They're having a good time. Okay.
Okay. Oh, that's a good question.
Are you guys having a good time?
We're having
Sure are.
We're having the best time.
The best.
All right, well, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're here with David. And David, you told us that you have seen Bigfoot. And it's a long story, but you're going to give us like the trailer version, correct?
Exactly right. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I possibly can. This happened in the summer of 2015. I live near Boston. It happened in a town called Weston on Church Street. I've lived there my whole life, never saw it before, haven't seen it again. Driving over this small bridge over an abandoned railroad track, I was driving with my girlfriend at the time and my sister. Someone told me, look down. There it was, standing on the edge of the abandoned railroad tracks. It wasn't standing behind a tree or in the woods, it was right there. At least 8 feet tall, 450 pounds. Just standing there watching that occasional car go over that bridge. Driving over the bridge, I said, you guys just see that? And they were too busy talking, two women. They're like, see what? I made a U-turn. We parked right there. We watched it for a good 5 minutes. Here's the most, I can't even talk because I get too excited about this. But here we go. This is how I know it wasn't a bear standing on two legs. And I know it wasn't a guy in a costume because here we go. I saw it plain as day. Again, it was about 75 feet away, down below us. And we're sitting in the safety of our car. My sister, to this day, said she saw a silhouette of it. And I hate to use the word blurry, but she saw like a blurry silhouette of the same thing that I saw perfectly. My girlfriend at the time didn't see it at all. We all had the same exact view. How do you explain that? Here we go. I've always believed. It shows itself to you if you believe in the thing, okay? My sister's always been right down the middle of the road. She kind of saw it, but she didn't see it. My girlfriend at that time never believed in ghosts, aliens, or Bigfoot. She didn't see it at all. 3 different experiences with the same exact view. That fits like the perfect jigsaw puzzle piece, okay? So in other words, you could probably walk right by the thing, unless you might smell it, okay? You wouldn't even know it was there if you don't believe in it.
Well, let me ask you this. So I grew up deer hunting, as you do in New England. And one of the things that I noticed when I would deer hunt is I would see things that I thought were a deer or bear or whatever, but it wasn't. So, I mean, you said like if you want it to see it, you'll see it. Or do you think that sometimes maybe you think you see something because you want to see something?
Well, I wasn't even looking for it. Someone just told me, look, as I drove over the bridge, and it caught my eye. Again, it was like 8 feet tall, 450 pounds, okay? So, like I say, it was weird. The whole thing was, it's life-changing when you have this kind of experience. And I know what I saw, and I can't say this enough. I don't do drugs. I wasn't drinking, and I'm not delusional. I'm a little out there. I've seen a lot of stuff in my life. Sometimes with people, sometimes by myself. But trust me, this was the most intense moment of my life, and I'm 63 years old. It was the most intense 5 minutes of my entire life, and I've seen a lot of things and been a lot of places. But that is absolutely true story. Take it to the bank.
And at the time, were you convinced it was Bigfoot, or did you kind of have to think about it a little bit more?
It was 100% Bigfoot, man. I mean, it was the brown fur, dark brown face, longer arms. It wasn't jumping around. but you could see it was alive. It was just standing there. Like I say, it was just curious about that occasional car that was going over the bridge. Again, this was in the town of Weston, Massachusetts on Church Street. And now today, it's a very popular rail trail. And when I go over that bridge, what do I see? All day long, there's people jogging, running, rollerblading, but usually when the sun's going down, just the same time I saw it, there's usually a very young, pretty girl with headphones on by herself going down that rail trail. I would not be doing that if I was her. If she'd seen what I'd seen, I don't think so. Okay.
Do you think Bigfoot would eat her? Like, do you think let me ask you this. Do you think Bigfoot is harmful? Is it just trying to let us live our life? Is it trying to live its own life?
That's a very good question. I think just like in the real world, there's good people and bad people. And I think some Bigfoots, whatever you want to call them, are just curious and they don't mean you any harm. Whereas others, maybe not so much. Okay. I think this one was just wanted to like see the cars. It didn't mean any, it was just curious. It was just standing there like it had never seen cars before.
And then, do you think that Bigfoot has any like supernatural powers at all?
Yeah, well, that's the ability how I could see it and my girlfriend couldn't see it at all. And she's looking at me like I'm crazy and I'm looking at her like she's crazy. It was like, how can you not see it? It's like right there. It's like, so what are you going to do,
Well, I appreciate you telling your story.
Well, like I say, it was a pleasure. And like I say, also that summer, I learned so many years later, one of the Weston police saw the same thing on the other side of town in a swamp. Okay, so I saw it and a cop saw it. So there you go.
Take it to the bank.
Righto.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right, so we're here with Grayson. Grayson, how long have you believed in Bigfoot, and why do you believe in Bigfoot?
I don't know if I do yet. I have a really big interest in it. Okay. I'm pretty young. I haven't had any sightings or anything like that on my own, but I'm really interested in the topic and just learning more about it and stuff like that.
Awesome. So that's okay. Cool. So you're kind of like me. I don't really know about it. I've been interested. I mean, what are kind of your thoughts? What's your ratio? Would you say you're 50-50 on it?
I'd say it's definitely a possibility. Like I'd say, like especially like in places like Alaska where it's like deep wilderness. I feel like if they did exist, that'd be the best place to find it, where there's no humans. But I don't know. It's something's really interested me. I feel like there's a good chance. There's a lot of evidence out there. Just never know.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, man. Yeah. All right, we're here with Rick. And Rick, so we're at Bigfoot Discovery Days. Yes. And we just kind of want to ask you, how long have you believed in Bigfoot and kind of what started your belief?
Well, just watching, Finding Bigfoot. Just that really was the biggest one, what's the other show? Not In Search Of, but Monster Quest. We watched those. And then me and the little woman was out in the woods one day, and we found a footprint. And that's really what got us to this level here. We met Phil, and, so that's why we're here now, is because of that. And it's pretty interesting,
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, we're here with Doug, and we're at Bigfoot Days out here in West Branch. And Doug, we just want to ask you why you believe in Bigfoot and kind of what started your belief in Bigfoot.
Okay. Well, as everybody probably watched some of the shows and all in the past, I grew up in the 70s, so there was a lot of movies to watch. And so I got out in the woods more, and then eventually I just had where there's more experiences, like noises and things you heard, and like the howls you hear. And then with the internet came out, there's just a wealth of information. So once I watched a lot more internet stuff, you're like, there's got to be something to this. And then I started going to conventions, and it just made me more of a believer. I haven't had an experience where I've seen one, but I've had experiences with sounds and things in the woods. So that's really what's kind of hooked me.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. All right, so we're here with Jeff, again, at Bigfoot Days. So, Jeff, just tell us briefly your story. How long have you believed in Bigfoot, kind of when you started, and what your experience has been since then?
I guess I've been believing since I was about maybe in my teenage years because, you see it on TV, and so, you get excited that, that it's out there. And so my first experience as hearing the Bigfoot was I heard sounds when I used to come up with my wife to my father-in-law's place, and I used to hear callings because we sit at the fire at night. And then one night there was a big slap on my house, and so that's my encounters with Bigfoot.
Thanks for sharing your story.
No problem.
So, Clinton, tell me a little bit about why you believe in Bigfoot, how long you have, and kind of what your experience has been.
Well, I guess it all started in childhood, growing up hunting and fishing, and just hear the stories, growing up around hunting camp and stuff. So basically, that's about it.
And have you had any experience? Have you had sightings, heard anything?
Haven't had any sightings, but I'm pretty sure we've had some vocalizations, some type of sound. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yep. Thank
My name Chuck Vigneault, and all I can tell you, my stories have gone back from when, I'm a big hunter. I'm always deep in the woods. And so, I got to thinking about all the times the strange things that's happened to me, and they would register. And I'm just saying over the last 25 years, a few weird things would happen. So I'm just going to tell you about the weird stuff that I saw. So my company said, hey, you got to use your vacation, you're going to lose it. And we used to be able to carry, months of vacation. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to take a month off and we're going to go hunting. So me and a buddy, we went up to Brevard. That's up, up north, by Brevard between St. Ignace and yeah, okay. So Brevard is right up in this area. Right there's Brevard. That might be Brevard Lake right there. So anyway, there's a lot of truck trails there that, you can go out in the woods for miles and miles and miles, and that's what we did. We hauled a trailer out there, and then we had a couple of ATVs, and so we had 2 weeks of bow hunting and then 2 weeks of gun hunting. And we set up all our stuff, and we were out there, and we were coming back to get there with the ATVs. We went by this swamp that was just gigantic. I mean, you can figure cattails 6-7 foot tall, and as far as you could see, it wasn't a place we were going to hunt, but we went right by it in our ATVs every day. So we were coming back, and we saw something walking across the swamp. And I mean, it was this far over the cattails. And, we never thought of Bigfoot, never really, we might have saw the movie when we were kids, but we never really ever thought about it. That thing was walking across that thing, and we said it was either a moose or a Bigfoot. It was so big. It wasn't running, and we watched it for a few minutes as it walked across the edge of the swamp, and it was a long ways, hundreds and hundreds of yards. We didn't have any of our gear. We left it at the stands. We just come in and get something to eat. And so we didn't have binoculars to look at it or anything. So that was like my first experience that I had to kind of think back of what were kind of odd things that I had no explanation. So then, that was about 25 years ago. And then about 10 years ago, we had a cabin up around Gladwin, and it was just a hunting cabin, and we always hunted state land. And I don't know if anybody has heard this Midland to Mackinac Trail. It runs through the swamps. It starts, right here in Midland, and then it goes all the way up. And it's a trail through the swamps that you can walk, and sometimes it's on private land, sometimes it's public, but you can go through that. And it was, later in the season, and we weren't seeing nothing, and I said, let's just take a walk down this trail. So we walked probably a good 3 or 4 hours into that trail, and we were in the middle of nowhere. And all these things happen in places where there ain't nothing around. So all of a sudden we were walking there, and the woods got super quiet. And I looked at my son. We were, not far from each other. It was a really strange, weird feeling. Everything was quiet. It almost felt like it got darker. And I took another step. And then we started to kind of smell. I started to smell something. And smell it. And all of a sudden, a deer jumped out in front, I mean, like this far from me. Now, it was laying down, and deer won't never do that. I mean, if you're walking, and a deer is not going to lay down unless it's hurt and it wants to get away. This thing was hiding, and it was hiding from something. And when we smelled that, and it jumped up and it took off running, oh my gosh, Dad, you smelled that deer before it, and I goes, well, I don't know if that's what it was, but it was just a weird feeling. So, the first time I thought I saw one. Second time, I think I smelled one. And then, now as I got older, I'm not out in the woods as much as I used to be, but, I want to do, I got into more of the Bigfoot thing and thinking about it and all that. So I had this Jeep, and I kind of set it up with, a couple Bigfoot stickers on it. And we always camp a lot of times up in, Oscoda on the Asabo River. So me and my son and two of his friends, we just head out in the woods, and we're driving that Jeep wherever we can, out in this old logging trail. And we came up on the Asabo, and I mean, it was way down in there, and they wanted to jump in, so the kids got down and they jumped in, and they got back up, and we drove back. But it was a beautiful scenery. So the next, we go back, and I tell my wife, and we got our grandkids there, and oh, come on, Papa, let's go up there and see it. All right, so I get, my wife and a couple of our grandkids, and we take this trail back up there, and we get to the top of this ridge, and there's the water, and at the time I'm going to do a Bigfoot call. So I did a Bigfoot call, and down at the bottom of the water and around the corner, a big yell back at me, and I thought, probably nobody walking through this woods way out here in the middle of nowhere. And so, the little ones would get scared a little bit, so I, did a three-pointer and turned the Jeep around and head back down, and I'm going to do one more just for the fun of it. And so I did another one, and that call had come around that corner, which, we're talking hundreds of yards, and, matter of, seconds or minutes, I don't know what it was, but when he yelled that much closer to me, the kids just, oh, Bubba, we got to go. So, I kind of waited around a little bit, and, they were screaming at me, so I put it in drive and took off. So, that was kind of my three experiences over my course of my lifetime. And they were always out in the middle of nowhere. And, yeah, the last one was, I didn't show. That would have been up in, Oscoda, right up around the foot dam, and, the ponds and stuff up there, So now, I'm a true believer, because my research, a little bit of the research, I'm not like these guys, but I like to watch the shows and read on it. And what really convinced me is how can so many societies over so many courses of hundreds and thousands of years have the same stories? The same stories. And that's really was, okay, I can understand now, Bigfoot, you got the internet, everybody can talk about it and everybody can talk. But what about 1,000 years ago, even 200 years ago? There was no possibility of that kind of cooperation. But yet they still were out there. So that's all I got.
Hey everybody, I'm George. I live about 18 miles, I guess, to the almost directly east of here over in Prescott. And got an 80-acre hunting camp, spent in our family about 35 years. And I decided about 3 years ago, I was going to move up there and homestead it. Never had power, just outhouse and a big hunting shack kind of barn thing. And so the place has kind of been vacant, 9 months out of the year, except for when my dad and his buddies and our family and stuff are there bow hunting and whatnot. But nobody's ever really lived there during the summer, so I've had a ton of experiences there. I guess I'll just just to make it brief, I'll go with the first one and the last one. So first one that kind of like, I wasn't really a full-on Sasquatch believer or anything. I had, seen some curious things in the woods and listened to stories and whatnot. I wasn't a disbeliever in any way, but it wasn't really on my radar. Wasn't something I was really thinking about too often. But one night when I initially moved to our property, which was the summer of 2019, I would say it was like beginning of August or something, and I had been kind of prepping myself knowing that the weather's going to change, it's going to start getting cooler, and I got to start thinking about, am I wintering in the barn? And I just had been huddling around this campfire that I just kind of made like my hangout area, and we never really had fires there. It's a bow hunting camp. My dad's a real purist. Like no one slams car doors or anything. It's like you do the click and butt bump kind of thing, and everybody's really, and everybody's from downstate, Flatlanders, idiots, whatever you want to call them. So I had to kind of like pay my dues to not be called one of those for a little while. But I was sitting by the fire one evening, and it was just kind of one of those real starry nights, and I hear this kind of like low, like a cow kind of sound, like a as about as good as I can get, but it was real deep and textural, like a cow, and it was off maybe a couple hundred yards to one side of me, and I'm kind of like, trying to think of like where the farms are close by, and there's nobody that has cattle right where I'm at, and I'm just outside the village of Prescott, and we're kind of up on a hill, so I can hear sounds through some of these kind of like terrain features pretty good. And it was off in this big 4 or 5 hayfields that there's just never anything in. I kind of hear this, and I'm like, what's that? And then off, say that was at my like 10 o'clock, off about my 1 o'clock, maybe 100 yards in, I hear another different toned one, kind of boom. And I was like, oh, kind of racing through my mind, like somebody's cows got out, or, it's maybe, I had a couple beers, I was sitting up, it was maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, so I start running through my mind of like, oh, what could that be? And then the first one goes back again, and I realized there was like a call and response kind of thing happening and moving towards me. It was getting closer, and then a third one chimed in much closer, within like, I would just estimate like 50, 75 meters or so. And I was like, okay, time to go in, and we've got a big barn that I can button up, and I got freaked out, but I still hadn't really put, Sasquatch in my mind yet. I was just running through loose cows, like, man, do we have a feral hog problem? What could this be? What could this be? And so I went in the upstairs, and we have a sliding door balcony kind of thing, and I was tiptoeing and creeping, all lights out, and I got my guns out, and I laid out on the balcony, and I got a pretty high-powered assault rifle and a 30-30, and then my little pea shooter pistol, and I'm laying there, and I'm like looking out at our kind of pasture area, and then there's these really thick pines, and kind of those sounds are coming right at me, moving, and and the thought popped into my head, man, could that be Bigfoot? Like, if it is, it's multiple. And then the next thought was, I was gonna see something come out of the woods. I just had this feeling someone's gonna walk right out, and the thought popped into my head: are you gonna shoot it? Would you shoot it? Would you shoot if you saw the mythical thing? And I told myself no, and I had put my phone up and hit video record, and I do have audio somewhere in iCloud of, I took a long video, it's just a blackness, and it's got the last maybe 2 minutes of these sounds kind of moving. So that was, not the most exciting story, but that's kind of what kicked off this kind of flurry of activity over the next 3 years. Anything from, you know, seeing kind of like impressions in the soft moss that look, you know, nothing like super definitive, like, man, that looks like a footprint, but, you know, 1,000 things can when you're in the woods long enough. And we have our back 40 is primarily swamp, and it's the bedding area for deer. It's really prime bow hunting kind of area, and it's rare to go down in that area. So over those years, when there's not a lot of people around, I was having, you know, some audio experiences. One night I had something go moo, like someone was imitating a cow over here. And then about 5 minutes later, I'm like, man, that was somebody just going moo. And then in the middle, kind of where those 3 sounds came from the first time, something went cock-a-doodle-doo, just like Looney Tunes, like the, you know, Bugs Bunny or something. And I'm like, okay, I had problems with some locals just making fun of me because they saw a Bigfoot sticker on my water bottle, you know, and I spent a lot of time discerning between my mental state, people pranking me, what I'm really hearing. And then the third one off to the right flank, I'll call it, goes, ow, 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 like imitating a coyote. And I was like, haha, that was the 3 sounds I got. And it was humorous. There was no kind of threat to it or anything. But so fast forward to the last experience. Now this was, I would say, late July, early August of last year, 2021, right in the height of like mosquito season. It's just hot and sticky. And one of my old hippie friends had told me, you know, long ago in a conversation, they were like, man, if you ever have a Sasquatch experience, leave them garlic cloves. They'll love you forever. Like if you're in the swamp, like leave them garlic cloves. And it just stuck in my mind. And I was always forgetting when I was at the store. And then one day I was just like, man, I don't know, what could it hurt? You know, like keep things away. I need some garlic in my life, whatever. So I bought these garlic cloves, and I had kind of just had them stinking up my pockets and stuff for a while. And I had some trail cams I had to move out in the swamp, and had a big predator problem with coyotes, you know. And I'm very protective of like my little birds and rabbits and stuff like that. I love the small game, you know, and the predator stuff. I just kind of like, I had some predator hunters just kind of really pushing their way onto our property, and I was like, you know what, I want to take care of my own predator problem. So I kind of reset some of my trail cams in areas that were low, that I thought, you know, I might see if there's coyote, bobcat coming through that area. I was all setting these cameras, and I put one in, and I had this pocket full of garlic cloves, and I had accepted, you know, I've got proof enough from these last couple of years that this is a reality of my life and these beings are real, you know, and I just kind of like come to the conclusion I really don't want to get a visual because I'm pretty far back by myself, and I feel like our understanding of a comfortable distance is good enough for me. And when I go back into the swamp alone in the dark, I don't know if anybody else will do it. I'm just one of the ones dumb enough. You know, it's always a feeling of like I'm being escorted or something. And so it was getting kind of dark. It was when the days are really long, so it was probably like 8:30. And I was getting kind of nervous, and I set this last trail camera, and the squirrels were going just berserk around me. And I was like, well, so much for being stealthy, you know. It's like, call it Squirrel War 3. They're just chattering, and, you know, I'm like, okay, guys, I'm here, you know, you got me. And I'm like, damn, squirrels. And the squirrels have just been giving me hell all summer, red squirrels in my barn. And I came back onto our main trail, and I stepped onto the trail, and the squirrel chatter just stopped. And everything got really kind of silent. And I had like 3 or 4 cloves of garlic left, and into the main body, the thickest part of the swamp where no one really goes. I kind of set a couple cloves of garlic out and just kind of made a statement like, hey, these are gifts. Thanks for letting me, you know, just sound like a crazy person in the woods talking to myself. And saying things out loud because through all the research, I'm just kind of figuring like if things do mind speak, that's nothing I really want to experience. So we'll just talk out loud. And I got enough voices in my head, I don't need another one. Yeah, I would be able to figure out which was which at that point. They probably know that already. But so everything kind of goes silent, and I'm like, it didn't really strike me as like that. I've listened to a lot of stories and that silence that people talk about, where just the woods goes dead and the kind of the fear projection. I didn't really have that, but I was like, oh man, cool. The squirrels stopped chattering. It was just striking that they weren't chattering anymore. And I found myself in this area that I had been a bunch of times, but it looked different. It was getting twilight, kind of this humid fog over the swamp, and just mosquitoes everywhere. And I'm like, okay, I gotta leave these garlic pieces. And then I hear this thump behind me. I took a couple steps, and I turned back over my shoulder, and there was like cleanly ripped in half red squirrel, and just the back legs, its tail, and its abdomen, like guts hanging out. And I'm like, all right, did a bird, I'm looking up, like, did an eagle drop it? I was just going through my mind of all these things, and I was like, well, man, something fast enough to snatch a red squirrel fresh, and it felt like they just went, hey, squirrel's bothering you? Look at this. And I was like,
or thanks for the garlic.
Possibly, yeah. It was kind of like, and just this, like, feeling of, I'm always feeling like I'm being watched out there. I'm getting kind of goosebumps talking about it. And, and it takes a lot to rattle me. I've been in a couple crappy places in the world, rough deployments. I'm a combat wounded guy, and I've had my brain rattled a few times. So, I kind of like don't necessarily trust myself sometimes when I'm out there. Like, there's times where you can think, a black squirrel's a huge buck, or, blue jay is something, so I'm always kind of skeptical of things. And it was just getting dark, and I was like, I kind of came to this conclusion, and through hearing stories, I was like, the nighttime's not mine anymore. I don't just aimlessly walk around like I used to, with one eye shut and just, being out there. But I was in the swamp longer than I felt comfortable, and I was like, I got this last little bit of light, and I've got to get up to my barn. And it's a path that comes out, and then I hit a bean field, take a left, walk the bean field up, go up the hill, and then I'm back at my barn, and it's safe zone. So I turn my red headlamp on, and it shows eye shine really good if I see a deer or anything. And when I get up to the bean field, and it's really getting hazy, I get up to the bean field just about maybe 20 yards in front of me, and it looked to be about 10 foot tall, just one red, large eye shine. And I just got wide-eyed, and I hit my white light, and there was nothing there. And I turned that light back off, and I got freaked out. And I was like, all right, I'm out of here. I was like, thanks, everybody, for playing along, and I'm just heading home. Thanks for letting me give you garlic or whatever, check my cameras, and talking the whole way up. And I get up to the barn. It's like a huge sense of relief. I'm back in home base, and I was like, man, I just couldn't stop thinking about that squirrel and what type of athleticism it would take to grab a red squirrel. They're just, like a red squirrel, if it came running at a full-grown human, you're like, whoa, they're just squirrely, for lack of a better word. And I said it out loud. I was like, hey, that's squirrel. As the relief came in, I was like, oh, that was impressive. And right from the valley, right behind my barn, there was a chirp. My dad does a squirrel chirp. I can't do it, but it's like a whistle chirp. Sounds just like when a squirrel does one little blast. And it sounded like it was on a PA system. And just whoop, right after, I was like, that was impressive. And I was like, all right, good night. We're going inside. And, I've slept with one eye open for a long time, but I guess to wrap it up, you know, what I've kind of taken from these experiences that I've been having there, like, I get a strange sense of comfort, and I feel like I have a safe place that these beings might travel through. And I would really like to keep it that, because, you know, I've been out there by myself for a long time, and if anything wanted to hurt me, it had a million chances. And obviously, you know, I've never laid eyes on anything. I've had some things that I just made the conscious decision not to look at out of the corner of my eye. But, you know, they could have me at any time. And I feel like we have a little bit of an understanding. And, you know, people scare me. Yeah, thanks.
Right from the instance I left that road and get out in that field, the whole 9 yards, it's etched up here forever.
Where does Bigfoot come from, essentially? You know, I've heard there's a lot of different ideas.
Sasquatch or Bigfoot are the descendants of Gigantopithecus.
Jacob's heritage, which was smooth skin like us, and then the all hairy red man like Esau was. If he in fact mixed with the giants, the Nephilim, you've got a being there, you know.
I think they're more closely related to us. I don't think they're a close relative, but I think they're more us than ape.
So within the Bigfoot community, I'm what is known as an aper.
We see something called a mid-tarsal break within these footprints that tells us that Sasquatch feet move like ape feet.
We've gone from hundreds of years of collecting evidence to one data point that would go beyond evidence, that would be proof.